So we could easily be talking about like all the fucked up shit that's happening right now, especially in America. Uh, the eroding of civil liberties, the direct attacks and erasure of trans people and queer people broadly, but especially trans people. Um, as well as what many and I would also describe as like a coup, a defanging of regulatory bodies and the American government's uh, like means to keep people alive. Like the getting of Medicaid, notwithstanding, just like even the postal service is probably going to suffer soon with just so much getting gorged out of our not even just social safety nets, but just the general infrastructure from like a soft infrastructure. I would say like I would think even like streets and sanitation in cities will suffer in terms of like management and stuff. Like a lot of government workers, federal workers, a lot of experts have been like fired in mass and all this stuff. And that's nothing to say about the ongoing genocides right now. Not just the genocide of trans Americans that's going on right now, but also of in the Congo, of Ukrainians, of Gazans. It's a mess. It's a mess. If you want to have a thing to bang on a drum while standing on soapbox about, there's plenty of stuff to do. And yet, I am sitting here about to read you an article written by a trans woman who has been othered in community, not because I am unaware or unwilling to acknowledge all the fucked up shit that's happening right now, but I'm trying to pinpoint something that we've explored and talked about before, even last year. Something that aggravates me, as I do see some of our mutuals on Blue Sky sometimes commenting on, even still, at a time where it's also very easy to say, just like it's easy to look for something to be very uh, upset and alarmed about, and within good reason. It's also, unfortunately, very easy to scapegoat people right now, as it has been, and it will increasingly be. And as things get worse, and as we continue to be less than acceptable queers in many people's eyes based on interests or takes or kinks and whatnot. And I mean, there's many ways for that to also be like, it's also easy for us to be a scapegoatable person in different marginalized circles, like how someone who has a DID diagnosis and only sees it as like a medical thing might scapegoat someone who is plural and might not be seeking medical diagnosis, and may take the stance that not all multiplicity is informed by trauma. There's plenty of people who, for example, do that. Unfortunately, Tumblr's social justice morality is something we're still going to have to contend with for all time. And honestly, that is just one brand of it. And like the divisive and fracturing of community based on arbitrary purity measuring uh, is going to be ongoing, and I want to revisit this. Other people in other spaces that we respect are talking about a lot of the other stuff that's going on. So this isn't even necessarily me attempting to stay in a lane. It's something we care about and want to talk about, and it affects people, even though obviously there's plenty that we could be talking about. So what's the shit I'm talking about? Hot allostatic load is a phrase that has gained a lot of meaning to us in the last year and a half, I guess, and uh, people who have been scapegoated, people who have been othered in community, been pushed out, been made to feel that a space is unhospitable for them, and for whatever reason, may be a victim of some of the stuff that's going to be talked about in this article. Um, Saying you got hot static loaded is maybe not the terminology that I want you to necessarily pick up from the talk we have here, but it is one that sometimes people use. Um, an example might be what happened to Isabel Fall. Um, a lack of good faith, an assumption of intention of harm, lack of nuance, and a need for reacting to someone in a bad way and thinking that their existence in a space is inherently harmful and it must be handled. Right, meow. I would say, from my perspective, as I understand it, would be uh, kind of what this article I'm about to read is exploring, and what if you were to turn it into a fucking verb to put on Urban Dictionary, it would be that's what it means to be hot allostatic loaded. But really, the hot allostatic load is just the things you have to hold, the things you have to hold that kind of burden your cognition or your cognitive faculties to be keeping in mind when navigating a space that is hostile to you, or not a welcoming space. And you would think that this might be something that, say, as a black person, I might have to struggle with going through white circles and different types of POC circles, having to code switch and stuff like that. And that is a thing. However, unfortunately, we're going to be talking about intra-community bullshit. And although there is definitely intersectionality in that as well, I think that it's important to note that the way we're going to be talking about it within queer community is not the only way that it can happen, and it happens all the time to a lot of people for a lot of different reasons. And not all reasons are invalid. Actually, a lot of reasons are valid. It's the implementation that ends up being a huge problem. And yeah, I'll probably be saying it a lot today. A lack of good faith or willingness to, or even just an unwillingness to meet people where they're at. Oh my gosh, it's hot allostatic load reading time. Gosh, I got a fucking nerd in chat. Yo, what up, Jen? I know we're gonna have an interesting discussion now that you're here. Ugh. Also, I want to acknowledge, maybe if only for my own ego, I even made a thumbnail for this stream on YouTube and stuff. We've been putting at least a little bit more work into planning streams generally. And want to do less just sporadic. Yeah, I'm streaming because I feel like I need to because I have a dopamine addiction. And have a lot of intentionality and something that we can keep up. We are actually been really worried about skipping a week of our normally scheduled programming because we don't want to fall off, and when we lose momentum, a lot of the time we fall off of like having a schedule completely. That being said, especially because Steam Next Fest is right now, it was like, oh, well, we always want to do Steam Next Fest, get some demos in, understand some of the stuff that's coming up, be able to recommend people stuff, and just, increase our repertoire of stuff we know. And then one of our mutuals posted just randomly on on Blue Sky, and it triggered us so bad. And I don't mean that in the sense of I'm mad at the mutual, because I am not. What I mean by that is I'm triggered in the sense of they were spilling tea, they were talking real shit. She was basically being like, oh, I've been to over 100 sessions of therapy, and they still haven't asked me about any of my problematic kinks or the anime that I watch. If it doesn't have anything to do directly with my self harm or like PTSD tendencies or something akin to that. And it started, just a uh, I essentially want to say a preaching to the choir discussion, because this is kind of one of those it's one of those queers in the circles that we are increasingly visible in, of like, weird queers that get othered for being unsafe or making people feel uncomfortable. um Increasingly we are finding ourselves surrounded by not just like say age players, but like Lily and Shotokan, and even amongst baby furs, people who generally, especially like 5-10 years ago, would be to be in the company of, or to be like chasing the aesthetics of, or being inspired by, would be a little bit spicy, you know. You know, your Strawberry and your Four Lungs and all that. In this sense of like, people who, in the same way that I was talking before about how someone who sees DID as this medical thing, and only as a medical thing, and like the worst thing to happen to them, even, and I'm painting a picture of a particular kind of person, right? In the same way that that type of person might go to a plural person, someone identifies as plural, oh, you are misusing a label, or you are romanticizing a state of being that is something that, if you recognize that you have, you should be fighting your hardest to fix, or what have you. In that same way, some of these weird queers, as some folks within these circles that we've increasingly found ourselves wanting to be a part of, are often ostracized because they're seen as romanticizing abuse and being unsafe to be around. And there's even associations between having certain kinks and being an abuser, especially if you like abusive media. But if it's just like video game violence equivalent stuff, it's probably okay. Although obviously it's not always, and everyone has like heckles about certain things. I definitely don't think that being uncomfortable with a certain thing, and we keep reiterating this, that being uncomfortable with a thing is valid, but saying someone doesn't deserve community because of interest in a thing is not a good look, and is bad actually. Yeah. And this is something we've increasingly been also worried about, and it feels stupid and silly to, in the middle of all this shit that I opened up this conversation with talking about, I could be talking about, in the midst of all of that, I still feel compelled to talk about what essentially is leftist and queer infighting, which will always happen. Right. But I've been aggressively more desiring to talk about it, as I have found myself feeling like a worse person because how I have been holding myself. At least in regards to one of my headmates made a joke of me needing to shake off some toxic masculinity, because I increasingly find myself wanting to repress some of my emotions, or not be as vulnerable, because I am as a headmate, could slide easily into the protector role. Not when I originally was me in the system, or before that when I was two separate headmates and they combined. But between that, being masked in a system of a lot of films, or historically a lot of just films, I feel not just a pressure to protect, but I also feel a pressure to distinguish myself, especially. And part of that has been not even just like the tsundereness that permeates my brand, but also this sense that me increasingly feeling very good with people being like intimidated by me and wanting to watch their words around me, but also don't roll with fear, you know. Not that I especially want to change myself to be as approachable as possible, because that's something that actually is something that my headmates actually have struggled with, and we have historically struggled with as a person of color and someone who's assumed to be masked in flesh space. Our lifelong endeavor to seem less threatening is certainly affected things, and I guess the reverberations of that are that in a brain where we have tried so hard to manage our threat level, I find freedom in knowing that my threat level is detecting as higher on some folks than others, despite it being people in spaces where we want to make friends and be good to people. Also acknowledging the fact that this unease isn't a necessary "oh, I feel unsafe around dusk." It's dusk is a little different, and it can make me a little bit harder to approach. I think a lot less so lately, but I have been reminded by my headmates that I could easily slip into some toxic tendencies by wanting to protect my heart a little too much. um I forgot how I actually ended up on this tangent. But I think I can easily segue into all this, because I think that the behaviors that I'm about to be talking about is stuff that comes from a sense of wanting to protect yourself, wanting to protect your heart, wanting to protect your people. And I think it's especially important to recognize like degrees of possible harm when you're assessing whether or not someone is safe, and also assessing the actions that you need to do. Because when we're having this conversation like a year ago on stream, it also had to do with uh the the increased and frothing at the mouth desire for people wanting blood, not just what people would say is like deplatforming, canceling, or what have you, but a lot of harassment, especially of queer people. It's almost as if people want to kick minorities, but they just want to find socially acceptable minorities to kick. Weird how that is. That's why we get uneasy, and obviously it's not something that we've like we talk about every time we experience it, but we feel very uneasy when someone who looks like us or is in similar spaces or even in similar fandoms than us, to make it even less about something that's necessarily immutable. We'll see people uh, reacting in a way that does splash damage, I guess you could say, where it's just like it feels like this is more than just about a person being an asshole, or a person doing possibly doing an abuse, or a person like misusing their power. There's also why there's a paranoia within queer spaces, to take one example, of assuming that criticism is homophobia, It's actually part of the reason that meme exists of a thing that I don't like happened and I'm queer must be homophobia, because it's absurd, right? But then also the world is absurd, and sometimes something actually just does boil down to homophobia or something like that. It's funny how the world works. Because people launder their prejudice intentions behind just fighting the good fight all the time. It happened before the internet, and it'll happen for as long as sentient beings exist, I'm sure. So it's also something to watch out for, because they're like well-meaning people who go too far, or are wrong-headed, but are willing to talk if things don't start from an aggressive place. And there are people who are looking for a fight and just want a socially acceptable place to have that fight. Uh, and that adds to the problems that permeate inter-community othering. But I could go on all day about why I'm having this conversation, and ancillary components to that importance that I'm hearkening on. But we could just read it and start jumping off of that. Build the shittiest thing possible. Build out of trash, because all I have is trash. Trash materials, trash bodies, trash brain syndrome. Built in gaps between storms of chronic pain. Built inside the storms. By Porpentine. Hi. I am too sick to write this article. The act of writing about my injuries is like performing an interpretive dance after breaking nearly every bone in my body. When I sit down to edit this doc, my head starts aching, like a capsule full of some corrosive fluid that's dissolved and is leaking its contents. The mental haze builds until it becomes difficult to see the text, to form a thesis, to connect parts. They drop into the page in fragments. This is the difficulty of writing about brain damage. The last time I was in a new inquiry, several years ago, I was being interviewed. I was visibly sick. I was in an abusive community that had destroyed my health with regular, sustained emotional abuse and neglect. Sleep deprived, unable to take care of myself, my body was tearing itself apart. I was suicidal from the abuse, and I had an infected jaw that needed treatment. Years later, I'm talking to a therapist. I told her, when you have PTSD, everything you make is about PTSD. After a few minutes, I slid down and curled up on the couch like the shed husk of a cicada. I go to therapy specifically because of the harassment and ostracism from within my field. This is about disposability, about from a trans feminine perspective, through the lens of an artistic career. It's about being human trash. I want to put a pin here because, well, I am in this weird gray trans mass space where I am a trans mass headmate in the body of in a trans feminine body, essentially. I am a weird existence that feels like the exact thing someone would say I shouldn't be visible about, or I shouldn't be seen because, you know, it might give someone the wrong message, or make someone think that that we're all playing pretend, or, you know, that something is invalid in our knot of different identities, and like how that reflects you know, communities or whatever. And I mention this specifically because within talking about any sort of trans issues, trans feminine perspectives are, well, the most visible, just incredibly so. And that's partially also because of the fear of trans femininity, or the hate and ostracization and othering of femininity in general. and the anger at someone who is supposed to be male, basically saying, I don't want that, you know? I think that, these perspectives are important, but I want to expressly mention that obviously this is just from a trans feminine perspective, the thing I'm reading. It's not the only way that this can happen. And that when we first came across this article and seeing people, especially on like Blue Sky, responding to it and having critical discussions about it, it was more than just trans feminine people resonating with what it was talking about. And I would feign to say that you don't need to be trans to identify with what we are going to be talking about. But you probably will have you're more likely to experience it the more marginalized or intersectionally marginalized you are, I would say. This is about disposability from a trans feminine perspective through the lens of an artistic career. It's about being human trash. This is in defense of the hyper-marginalized amongst the marginalized. The homeless kids. The marked for death. Those who came looking for safety and found something worse than anything they'd experienced before. For years, queer trans feminist scenes have been processing an influx of trans femmes, often impoverished, disabled, and or from traumatic backgrounds. These scenes have been abusing them, using them as free labor, and sexually exploiting them. The leaders of these scenes exert undue influence over taste-making, jobs, finance, access to conferences, access to spaces. If someone resists, they are disappeared. In the mundane, boring, horrible way that many trans people are susceptible to, through a trapdoor that can be activated at any time. Housing, community, reputation, gone. No one warns them, no one asks questions. Everyone agrees that they must have been crazy and problematic, and that is why they were gone. We've seen this happen to multiple people. We have seen this we've seen attempts to do this to people. It's still something we are processing has happened to us in ways, and it's exceedingly common. It's a banality of evil sort of thing. And I say that, but I also want to remind people that these things are done by people. Even these slow eroding things, the social murder, the isolating a person and making them really want a KYS and stuff like that, pushing people out of communities so that their lives just suck, and holding them to a standard of your life should suck. It's done by people that it's done in situations by people that you will ostensibly trust. I mean, to be completely fair, someone in my particular position actually does have some power to do this to someone, which is also why we try to be aware of our power and hate hierarchy. You see, if you're trying to build a community, albeit small, if you have any sort of sway in a community, if you have trust, you can weaponize that trust against people. It's kind of like Beyblades. This is the same parts, It's just you use them differently. I don't know why I compare it to Beyblades. Been thinking a lot about Beyblades lately. I was one of these people. They controlled my housing and access to nearly every resource. I was sexually harassed, had my bathroom use monitored, my crumbling health ignored or used as a tool of control, was constantly yelled at and was presumed to hurt other trans people and punished severely when I refused. The cycle of trans kids being used up and then smeared as a systemic, institutionalized practice. It happens in shelters, in the radical organizations, in artistic scenes, everywhere they might have a chance to gain a foothold. It's like an abusive foster household that constantly kicks kids out then uses their tears and anger at being raped and abused to justify why they had to be kicked out. Look at these problem kids. Look at these problem kids. Look at these problematic kids. Yeah. It's also on in a less intra-community framing. It's also what generally happens to minorities. If you want to make a minority less popular in a given place, then you want to make them okay. People talk about dehumanization, of course, comparing people to like literal vermin. That is a big sign of genocide, you know, either current genocide or genocide on the horizon. But what generally making someone out to or a group to be a vermin or just generally not worthy of human respect or consideration means that that person's safety is not you don't hold that person's safety in the same regard that you would hold the safety of a human, because you now hold the person in a different category of subhuman for whatever reasons. And I think that I have increasingly become aware of, and I've seen this explicitly happen to trans women, though I'm sure it's happened to many other people. I guess I could probably say the person who wrote the webcomic Boyfriends has probably had this to some degree happen to them. This thing of being treated in bad faith, being called shitty things, or being insinuated to be unsafe or abusive, and also at the same time being unwell, either because of pre-existing mental illness or this atmosphere kind of wearing down the person. They react badly, they have a meltdown or something, and the meltdown is pointed to as a reason that this person is unsafe and needs to be ostracized. Actually, part of the reason that I feel so spurred to do this, because when we were talking last stream, when Fantasia was talking about, you know, the morality of Loli show and shit, and sort of the othering that, like, say, queer people in the space are treated, and having someone in chat go, you know, I know that there's not a one-to-one correlation between being into stuff like that and doing actual harm. However, being a queer person, like, exposed to the discourse that talks about whether or not certain people are safe or are essentially allowed to have community. If you have the wrong opinion, you might also get social murdered. And it reminded us that we are still operating out of fear to this day, which is probably also why I'm the one doing this, because we've talked about our being stuff like Lily Show while also being Baby for example, multiple times over the years, increasingly so. We've been trying to be open about it, but also recognizing that a lot of people have been literally deplatformed for less, even or especially ones that aren't as quote unquote well spoken as us and willing to meet people where they're at. Actually, the qualities that you do not find in the folks that perpetrate all this social murder are the things that we try to be very very about. And as someone who expects to have an unpopular opinion, or at the very least be listened to less, even within marginalized spaces, like I was talking about before about decreasing threat level, we're very much used to approaching conversations with more goodwill than we expect to get, for example. Um, I won't say that our personal experience of being otherized and ostracized was from that sort of stuff, but we have seen it happen to people from that sort of thing. We've seen people, like lose relationships, lose, like whole friend groups and connection to like material community for being into the wrong things, you know. And I mean, even to a degree, like it is kind of a wedge issue depending on the thing that is dividing you. I remember there was some people who felt really uneasy with potential harassment of like being a trans person while, say, playing Hogwarts Legacy on Twitch or something. I do remember that was a thing. I remember there was a few streamers who were like, "Oh, I'm like really scared" or whatever. And I mean, again, we try to have more good faith than we would expect, and we understand a lot of people being like, that's really the hill that someone's gonna die on, but I really want to play this game that has all this like that has a material that materially helps people want to, like, say, kill trans people, right? But the lack of nuance of like the disconnect between the entertainment and like necessarial endorsement is something that needs to be reiterated for a lot of people, so that they did not immediately go, this is automatically a value judgment. Although it's hard not to have a very aggressive take on something like that, because and we mentioned this last week with the Lily Show thing, where it's like a lot of like the alt-right in anime circles and on 4chan have very much glorified Lily Show and made that sort of their thing. In the same way that we used to not want to publicly be like, we're a Resident Evil fan, because Resident Evil is filled with fucking cops and military apologists and like fucking essentially like deputized soldiers that essentially get to choose who lives and who dies, and could probably write off any murders they do as, oh, I was just fighting bioterrorism, if they want it. But they're all written as heroes, so it's fine. Though I think at the time that we were worried about that, we weren't so much like, oh, I'm gonna get canceled, because we weren't even making content at that point. But we were just like, is it even okay to like guns as a leftist? Right? Like we were that like kind of fucked up about like the morality of entertainment. And I think it is important to disentangle these things. I think it's important to recognize that both fiction is not equal endorsement, but also people do reflect their values through art and try to signal their values through art. In the same way that there's the fucking weird woke list. And there are people who have, turned themselves in knots trying to figure out how to label something as, you know, traditionalist and, not progressive. Um, there is an easy way to take social justice and progressiveness and recognizing that a thing is bad, and then kind of overextending your recognition of it and projecting it onto, well, not folks that under no circumstances should be criticized. Like, definitely no one's beyond being criticized, but kind of getting a lot of false positives in situations where it might you might need to have more nuance, especially based on who you're talking to. Going back to the Hogwarts Legacy thing, having nuance and holding some space for a trans person playing it is one thing. But like a white cishet person who's like, I just want to enjoy my media, no, interrogate that fucker, you know? And that's how we feel about a lot of these things. Um, but it is really easy to kick someone in the shin, and then when you get kicked back, say to the teacher, "Yeah, I got kicked in the shin. It was their fault." Uh, it sucks. Trans femmes are especially vulnerable to abuse for the following reasons. A lot of us encounter concepts for the first time and have no idea whether it is normal or not. We have nowhere else to go. Abuse drives on scarcity. No one cares what happens to us. I think that as we understood what it meant to be queer as we were growing up, these things were basically tenets of like our own potential vulnerability. We stayed in the closet for a very long time, just generally queer, not just like gender type stuff, because of this. Queer people, especially queer young people, are totally Omalas kids. Like a lot of people talk about wanting to protect kids, and then when the kids are queer, they're like, actually, protecting them means putting them in fucking I forgot what it was called. The thing that should be illegal that's probably about to be like super legal soon. Conversion therapy. Yeah, people will be like, I want to protect children, and then when the children end up being queer, they are like, protecting them requires putting them in conversion therapy. Okay, going back to this symbolism with a foster home that thrives on abuse to justify its own existence. This foster cycle relies on amnesia. A lot of people who enter the spaces for the first time don't know these spaces' history. They have not known that leaders regularly exploit and make sexual advances on new members, or that those members who resist it are no longer around. Safe spaces self select for people who will play the game, until the empathetic people have been drained out, and the only ones who remain are those who have perfectly identified with the agendas and survival of the space. The pyramid scheme of believers who bring critical capital and victims to those at the top. My first puberty was a nightmare, faced with the opportunity to make my second one a healthy, healing experience. I was instead abused and broken. The community practiced compulsory BDSM sexuality, which was deeply inappropriate considering it was one of the only visible spaces for trans people interested in making games. I didn't need that coercion in my life. I needed safety and mentorship. I think that this is something. Oh, I'm not reading right at the second. I think this is something that is critical for like queer spaces to recognize, while at the same time recognizing that a lot of like alternative sexual practices, or like say non-monogamy, for example, like there are a lot of non-normative modes that are, they're seen as, they should only be practiced at home, or like you shouldn't tell anyone but your partner about it type stuff. And I think that on one hand, it's important to recognize that there is going to be a puritanical push, or even a desire to make the space more sanctified, I guess, look cleaner, uh, less weird or gross from an outside perspective. I don't think that this is what this criticism is, but I do think that someone could easily mistake it for that, because I think that one of the problems with queer community, especially in America, or specifically in America, since we don't have context for how like queer stuff in queer community functions in other countries, I think that the way that this is mentioned, compulsory BDSM sexuality, I think can even be as simple as referring to some people on a team or in a space as bottoms, you know, or subs or whatever. To even using some of those terms as normalized and watered down in certain spaces, or as trivial as they are in some spaces, it does it can reinforce power dynamics. It can make someone feel like they need to go along with how people talk in the space, despite being uncomfortable with it. That sort of thing. And you know, BDSM is deeply intimate. So even though like I'm a proponent of being weird and gay and kinky and plenty of spaces, I feel like I have to check my own ego by recognizing that it is not a hospitable space for everyone in the same way that we feel sometimes very on edge about, say, pride celebrations being overtly dependent on the consumption of alcohol and loud music. Uh, and even like the history of like queer community from a United States perspective has a lot to do with like stuff like cruising and like these secret like queer clubs or BDSM clubs that existed in a sort of like in a gray market sort of way. um and recognizing that for a lot of people, unfortunately, like their first queer experiences are seeped in, well, having to go under the radar and being in potentially in an unsafe space, especially for the age that some people may get into stuff, looking for community because they've been denied community as a young person, because young people aren't like allowed to be queer and stuff, which also ends up going back around to one of these tenets of not knowing what's normal or not. If you are a late bloomer in a queer space, or I should say, if you've come out in adulthood, then your queer experience is going to be a lot different because of your relative newness to some of these things. And there are people who are going to take for granted that you don't know certain things. And that does sometimes get you into trouble. Uh, Same with, in some ways, criticizing compulsory BDSM sexuality or those vibes in the room, because some people may misinterpret that as you being a prude or being like, anti BDSM. But as she said, she didn't need that coercion in her life. She needed safety and mentorship. I mean, especially when like you're in an artist collective, also trying to scrape by a living day by day, and maybe having unstable housing. A lot of these things build and build and build, and you feel like you have to do the thing and talk the way people want you to, or else that you will be denied this stability. I spent these years of my early 20s not making connections or gaining valuable socialization that I had missed out in my youth, but being exploited and brainwashed in nightmarish isolation. I was scared away from the inclusive coding spaces, the inclusive conferences, and their orbiting alt events, and everything else that people like to pretend is available for trans films. Things escalated for the Allied Media Conference of 2013. Unfortunately, I was traveling alone. People from the abusive community overheard me asking about safe space resources in Oakland and became angry that I was seeking to escape their community. I was intimidated in person by someone who had a great deal of social power over me. I had a panic attack and went to the bathroom to dry heave and cry. Shortly afterwards, threatening messages began bombarding my Twitter and my phone, and the community began to develop a coordinated political response to my desire to leave. People suddenly stopped talking to me, and I felt an icy net of isolation drawing tight. This was the only time a conference responded appropriately. AMC apologized, notified the security team to check up on me, and encouraged me to submit a talk next year. I came back and ran a workshop with two friends for security, and a small amount of healing was possible. Some things, sometimes positive things happen. Happen to me and it can happen to you. Fuck yeah. Nightmare amongst ordinary people. Yeah. It's usually ordinary people who follow the orders of the not so ordinary people. This reintegration was not made anywhere else. I was excluded from the vast majority of game spaces because of what happened to me. Of course, the multimedia nature of AMC meant it had the least stake in preserving the reputation of games and other things that matter more than people. When I got back home, I was kicked out of my housing. I later learned that the community had been contacting my landlord for months prior to the actual eviction, as well as spreading rumors throughout my field. These seed rumors as a common tactic in these spaces, cultivating a brittle structure around people that can be shattered when necessary. Living was my sole attempt at innocence. That's an interesting, that's an interesting sentence. I guess in the context of how people harass someone and will literally say you did it, KYS, or attacking KYS to whatever accusations exist about you. Uh, I can understand it being like, well, I'm living and I'm choosing to live. Doesn't that prove that I'm innocent? This is a hard read every time. That sounds familiar. Yep. Yep. One of my abusers was sent a list of the nominees for the upcoming Games Festival Indie Arcade. Unfortunately, I was on the list. Unfortunately, I was on the list. I ended up winning an award, ostensibly to recognize my feminine labor in areas of marginalized game design. Years of creating access for other people, publicizing their games, giving technical support, not to mention the games I had designed myself, instead of solidarity from other marginalized people in my field. I was attacked. Anyone else getting that award would have been able to just get that award? But people like me aren't allowed to just have careers. Feminist culture saw fit to give a pass to every man and every cis woman who got that award. But when a trans femme from a disadvantaged background stepped up, she somehow happened to be the worst. The culture was fine with me as long as I was window dressing, but daring to excel got me kneecapped. Oh, it kind of reminds me of the thing with, well, actually, with trans sports, even if you are like last place, they still don't want you to compete, and will still say that you are cheating. You're trying to cheat or whatever and have some sort of advantage. Can't win for losing, honestly, literally. They spread rumors that I was sending harassing messages to people, even as the messages streamed one way towards me. They said I controlled uh, a misogynic mob and was using it to attack people. I had never been more alone. I was called a pedo, a rapist, an abuser. The typical dog whistle is used in feminist spaces to evoke the dangerous tranny stereotype invading your bathrooms. Even when the rumors were debunked, even with a history of cohabitating respectfully with partners and the history of being a respectful tenant, the damages was never repaired. The purpose was to keep firing until I was gone, until every possible bad thing had been said about me. This is actually what happened to Tyga. Gosh, I don't think I particularly tend to talk about Tyga. It's usually a Scribble thing, because Scribble is more directly, like, friends with Ty, but like what happened to Tyga is kind of that, because like someone who was an old mod of theirs who was like romantically sexually interested in them and got turned down was the person who made the original doc and had encouraged people from Ty's community to cooperate on it. And even to this day, even though the stuff that I had just said is, like, is public information that, some YouTubers who have talked about it already know, the personal and reputational effect is never washing off of her. And it sucks when this happens to people. It happens to all types of people. The YouTuber Quite we actually are the first YouTube video of Quites we saw was literally clearing up and responding to allegations about all this bad stuff. And I think this is a tactic of a lot of deplatforming of anyone. Unfortunately, obviously, there are people who, I guess, for example, there's like when there was discourse going on about like Sophie from Mars and how she had done like coercive and fucked up shit in relationships, and the people who were blowing the whistle were like, "Hey, we want people who may end up in a interpersonal relationship with this person to know her history so they can make a decision if they want to like date her or not," because there's been a thing that was specifically in like this in the like these intimate relationships, but was something that they felt they wanted to be public so people could make a decision. But it made a particular point to be like, don't cancel her, do not isolate her from the community, do not, you know, throw her in a box and you know, lock her in a box and throw away the key, as what happens to many people, especially trans women. And I think that there are lots of situations where people are trying their best in good faith to do something like that, to blow a whistle, but not to you know, turn the person into a, you know, a faggot burning on the public square pyre. You know, despite that, unfortunately, there is a lot of dogpiling and a lot of people who will throw anything to that can halfway stick. In the same way that right wingers might flood you with information that you have to basically debunk, while they're just spitting more lies in the time it takes you to clear up half of them. It's over information. So in that same way, it was like throwing everything in the kitchen sink at a person. With Ty specifically, I remember us picking through all the stuff and being like, okay, I am willing to listen to like size of story on this, or you know, or that, or having opinions on certain things, and then being like, okay, this is bad, and these things, nuance is required, you know, that sort of thing. An attempt to, if you don't care about reasons A, B, and C to cancel this person's, E, F, and G will certainly make you think twice, you know. And in terms of like, you know, having bad kinks and that being a reason to cancel someone, I have seen way too many times someone being accused of being abusive, right? And then part of that abuse, or even the abuse itself, is cited as being a baby fur, or being into Lolly Show, or being into Goro. I mean, of course, these conversations have been really weird lately, especially with, say, the thing with Neil Gaiman, and how Neil Gaiman was in a bunch of, was the perpetrator of a bunch of abusive relationships that he was defending himself by saying, this is BDSM. Sorry, allegedly. I don't want to get sued. So that is to say that certain things can be used in a bad way, but a lot of times it's just extra ammo to make a person look bad. Just keep firing until they're gone, as was said. Yeah, this is literally experience with the local ADBL scene. Fuck. That sucks. The Reputation game was used to paint a vulnerable, isolated trans girl too scared to leave her room most days as having power, which she did not have. Power which my abusers, veterans of queer and artistic scenes with decades of institutional privilege, did have. It happened without a warning or recourse, without a single attempt at conciliation. Multiple times I have noticed tension building and had asked explicitly for mediation. Every time this was refused. When we're exiling someone for petty political reasons, it works best when they can't tell their own story, but privately vocalizing concerns that I was being abused. I became a public target, presenting a false chronology to observers. Previously, their ostracism had been silent, made simple by the fact that no one cared about what happened to trans femmes who made games. They still don't. The fact that my games had inadvertently made me visible meant that the attack had to be devastatingly public. My fake crimes can commensurate to the amount of disgust required to repel me. This is the danger of the token system. It elevated me to a level of violent politics I was unprepared for. This actually makes me want to round back to the thing that I mentioned before about how, like, brain fart, how specifically within, like, say, a queer community, a marginalized community, even like black community, there is going to be resistance from the, say, from fellow queers to jump on accusations of someone being a bad person that has a certain amount of notoriety, because, well, people try to deplatform us or try to ruin us with this sort of stuff all the time. So sometimes we have our walls up too much. The thing with James Somerton, for example, we didn't know about H-Bomb's takedown yet. We only knew about was it Todd in the Shadows, and we had watched Todd in the Shadows before a couple of times, but Todd in the Shadows is not expressly to us, from what we had seen of him, was not expressly a left person. And I mean, even so, people on the left have been increasingly transphobic or homophobic lately, at least in American politics. So, like, when we first saw when that was the first part, or the first place we saw criticism of James Somerton, we were immediately like, I don't know, are you sure? But instead of, like, lashing out or commenting on the video, you lie, we, you know tried to listen to multiple from multiple directions. uh and that's the thing too, like, you have to do your due diligence as well. Like, I think it's important to have some amount of it's important to leave some space for there to be miscommunication, or something to have been exaggerated, or whatever way for the accusations to be not as bad or misplaced, or something isn't as it's framed. It's fine to hold that, and it can be very important to hold that. And the more you trust a person or a brand or an artist, the more willing someone is going to be to hold that. But also, by that same measure, that visibility might also breed resentment. And of course, even though famous people who are rich, even though famous people are rich, can have the same visibility as a famous person who is just, like, internet famous and is essentially just, like, super poor, or, like, working middle class. Who am I kidding? If you're working middle class, you're super poor. Even in those situations, taking someone down a peg, feeling like you are contributing to a famous person getting what they deserve, it feels good. But sometimes those feelings are misplaced, and you could probably be positioning something like that at, like, say, like a Logan Paul, than, say, an Isabel Fall, you know? Few people want to defend a target of disposability. I was told by one person that she couldn't risk losing her job, another that she didn't want to become a target too. We've seen both sides of this as well. being like, I don't feel safe visibly saying that I'm on your side, even though I am, because then I will also be in the Omelus bots. And that's how things keep going as they do, because everyone's afraid of reprisal and no one wants to speak up. I shouldn't say no one, because I want to say that in a lot of these situations there are people who do, but you know, it's drowned out by the people who just go along for the ride. And of course, there's a lot of people who are ambivalent. To some people, it just ends up being like silly internet drama between, I guess in this case, weird queers who make video games. I say weird queers who make video games, but I'm not trying to paint the writer of this article as weird in the same ways that we are, just in case people who are watching want to, you know, dogpile someone that can dogpile us. Though, in terms of interesting, like, sets, liberatory stuff, very, very good shit from what we've played of hers. Though, the games we play of hers, we can't play on Twitch or YouTube. We'll have to play it on Picardo or something. Way too spicy. Very few people want to defend a target disposability. I was told by one person that she couldn't risk losing her job. Another, she didn't want to become a target too. I was threatened into not defending myself. Gaslit into silence. Told that people knew things about me that were never explained. When I asked how I could do accountability, when I said I would do whatever they wanted, they said that I was incapable of accountability, that my crime was unknown, and that my sentence was permanent. That this is where the body, this is the point where the body starts to die. Nothing you do will ever be enough. Something that we have in our personal life have changed in our outlook on ourselves and how we have harmed others. We have, in the past, presented ourselves explicitly as an ex-abuser or someone who is trying to move away from being abusive. We felt the need to basically hang a sign around our neck to say, if you get close to this person, they will hurt you and it won't be worth it. And that was self-harm. And I think that, especially in being able to talk to a therapist, even albeit briefly, multiple times after the fact of like the utter collapse of our life that we thought was 100% our fault, we have and talking about it with friends and loved ones, specifically arguing from the perspective that we have done wrong and that we need to like repent, or you know, that even though you know, we're worthy of like love or something, that like we should still be in the hot seat or whatever. After enough of reading stuff like what we're reading right now, of hearing other people's experiences and the tactics and tendencies of people, not just necessarily people in abusive situations in the sense of purposely trying to otherize people, but also what people do when they don't feel safe, when they feel threatened, and when they do things that they may end up with with hindsight, maybe regretting a little bit of. There's a lot of that. There's a lot of that essentially has the same results as people doing these things on purpose, but in recognizing those things, that those things can happen, that these things are nuanced, we were able to hold ourselves in a place that is not self-harm. At least I don't think. But we also want to always keep balance, because we never want to be like, my shit don't stink. We never want to be like, we never did anything wrong. We were never in a bad place. And I think that the whole like lashing out and the lashing out because of like not being okay predicating like being kicked out of like community or housing or whatever is still like a fucked up cycle, and sometimes it happens even when no one's making shit up, you know. I mean, I think that there's a particular picture of the specific trans woman that this happens to, or at least the how a particular type of trans woman is perceived of being uh, a internet an internet addicted boy moding fucking weeaboo assumed white trans woman with BPD who smokes tons of weed and has a complicated relationship with her family and parents, and may or may not be in between housing. I'm basically just I'm just painting a picture of Dorian Gray here. Uh, but there is I don't want to even call it a straw man because there's a lot of people that describes. And people like that get scapegoated. And I think the fact that like a very particular type of person, a particular kind of washout queer person is going to identify with a lot of stuff that I just said, whether they're trans femme or not. Especially within the spaces of, like, say, the people who speak our language are people who have BPD, are probably self-diagnosed with that BPD, have an Ava character that they identify as, and who they use that identification to flagellate themselves when they feel bad. And who just can't seem to keep people in their lives. And it's like, it's very easy to be like, oh, this is this person's own fault. And especially if, you know, you are assumed to be idolizing, or at least being like, he just like me for real, someone like Shinji Ikari. Or any of the washout losers that trans people sometimes, or queer people tend to identify with. Honestly, someone who breaks that paradigm, I think, is someone like Bridget as like a trans character, or like someone that trans people look up to, and like is very much a like a symbol and a character that a lot of people flock around. Because as far as I understand it, Bridget is not a girl failure. Bridget's not a failure. Not to say that identifying with girl failures or boy failures or them failures is like a failure of your imagination and, you know, trying to do better for yourself. Because, you know, there is, you know, coping and understanding and identifying with characters that have your faults, especially that have your faults and still succeed and can find happiness. That shit is a good feeling. But unfortunately, just having like BPD or depression or bipolar disorder or a lot of the other things, especially something like PTSD, which honestly I think BPD should be considered a form of PTSD. I'm gonna be real. I don't want to super go into our thought process on it. Maybe we'll revisit it at some point. But I feel like BPD should just be classified as a subtype of PTSD. I mean, the amount of people who have BPD and complex PTSD, I think anecdotally I've seen a big overlap. But I feel like there is a logic to it, though I haven't looked at any research that may support my claims. I might want to do that before I start flying off the mouth talking for hours about that particular subject. Who else identifies as Masato? I think Masato is certainly a vision of an older Shinji in a lot of ways. Um, I definitely have identified more with Asuka than someone like Shinji or Masato. Um, Maybe what's her face? Lab coat lady. Ugh. And that's the sort of thing. It's like identifying with a character that you have complicated emotions about is an interesting thing, because there's like people who say take the wrong things out of Rick and Morty and go, oh yes, I am me identifying with Rick Sanchez is a symbol of me being better than other people and people just not understanding me because I'm so awesome. There's a person who's like that, who identifies with a flawed character and thinks that they actually have no flaws and the flaw is actually the world. And then there's people who are like, I identify with this heavily flawed character and they are proof that I am fucked up, but that I might have some amount of worth. Maybe. Maybe. My attackers were expert pathological liars who had been getting away with it for years. Entire fictional realities playing out in their social media accounts like soap operas. Escaping from abuse is the most certain way to become painted as an abuser. And being an abuser is the most sure way to be believed. We're still reconciling with those two sentences to this very day. And I guess it's also because when we see overlaps in stuff that we've experienced from someone that we completely, and this is especially something that's happened in our past, where it's like someone will have a very, very similar experience to what we experienced, and they will be like, you know, this is a bad thing that happened to me, and whatnot, and we'll have this really strong internal reaction where we have a desire to and we don't always aren't always successful in repressing this urge to like poke at the edges of it, of their feelings about it, to while we were in the headspace of feeling like we were the sole cause. Oh shit, OBS disconnected. Weird. It's still buffering. It went down for a second, but apparently we're back. What was I gonna say? As we were trying to process our own stuff, but felt like we were, you know, the villain in the situation, and you know, there was the burden of fault was pretty much entirely on us. When we interact with people who have very similar experiences to us, we couldn't help but feel like they were at more fault than they were admitting. And it took a long time for us to move away from that urge, because basically we were doing like an AoE attack on ourself, and there was potential splash damage for the people around us with similar like attributes. And then we recognized that maybe we were less at fault than we originally assumed. Of course, we had been poking at the edges of our own culpability the entire time, because, well, we also were trying to figure out like the nuance of it and uncoupling our complicated emotions from it. Because the other thing is, if you are accused of abuse, the worst thing you can do is outright deny it. Well, that feels like a weird like oxymoronic statement, but generally speaking, at least in the like in pop culture, the people who have generally been like, no, I didn't do it, da, 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 often end up being people who did actually do it, actually. And often trying to trivialize what happened and gaslight the accuser. And if you actually believe in like accountability and, you know, like justice or whatever, when you're in a situation, even if the situation has been fabricated, or the perspective framing is just leaves no grace and no nuance, then you will generally find yourself being like, or sorry, if you're like us you might find yourself going, the only way this makes sense is if I am bad, regardless of what my own experience or my own internality of what happened was, or my own internality of who I am or what I've done. The only way any of this makes sense is if I take responsibility, because at the end of the day, you know, if I believe in my own shit, I have to be willing to admit when I fuck up. And I mean, especially from a like community leader standpoint, you better be ready to admit when you fuck up, you know? So it kind of works against you sometimes when you do actually believe the social justice shit. Though I would say that it is better to be willing to be critical of yourself than not. It just also, you should be willing to believe yourself at least a little bit. I would think that most people don't have this problem. I think that most people do push back. At least I would think so. Most people don't go, "Oh, yeah, you're right." Although a lot of us slink away, knowing that any response that we do cough up will probably make the situation worse in the short term, just by way of defending ourselves. Well, I'm glad that Evie, I'm glad that it only takes a certain amount of gaslighting for that to happen. Because how we used to be, you didn't even need to gaslight us, or you barely needed to gaslight us. We're still working on it. Please don't gaslight us. Oh yeah, I'm just gonna start this paragraph over. My attackers were expert pathological liars who've been getting away with it for years, and entire fictional realities playing out on their social media accounts like soap opera. Escaping from abuse is the most certain way to become painted as an abuser, and being an abuser is the most sure way to be believed. You know how movies are realer than reality? How the sound effects and physics become so normalized to us that reality seems flat and fake? Talking about abuse is kind of like that. Abusers know what sounds real. They're like expert movie effects artists. Victims are stuck with boring, fake reality. Yeah, because abuse is often mundane. Abuse is not often kicking the dog, as it were. Social media is significant to my story because for a long time, it was my only outlet as a disabled individual barred from many physical spaces, and a way to express myself artistically that traditional outlets were closed to me. However, it came with its own set of problems. When I told another trans person that had been abused, I was told in response that my follower count on Twitter was higher than hers. I can't not laugh at the absurdity of that. That's apples and oranges. I immediately go like, I'm immediately thinking of Britney Spears, because I'm now thinking of the thing I was saying before of like certain people conflating someone's online visibility with having the capital and influence that being actually rich and famous provides, and in the way of like deplatforming or taking to task someone who is highly visible, you may get the false positive schadenfreude of taking someone to task who is rich and powerful. And in that same way, it's hard for people to decouple that association with, you know, someone who does have like high numbers, or comparatively higher numbers than yours, because they don't even have to be a high enough numbers for it to for them to actually have that much power. I've once seen someone complain about the power that someone with 1K followers had, and it kind of, it made me feel really gross. I'll put it like that. It takes a minuscule, comparatively to the amount of numbers that people count as like doing well or actually being visible, the stuff that the amount of following that someone will not call you a micro celebrity or with an internet fame or recognition spaces. It won't be like, oh well, they're tiny, like anything under like 1 million subs or something, you know. Uh, damn, my brain is flighty today. Uh, there's just the sense that if someone has comparatively higher numbers than you, then they must comparatively have more power than you, or at least have more people to listen. And I mean, to a degree, it's understandable that someone might reach that conclusion. I mean, for example, someone might say that someone with 1,000 Twitch followers is obviously more influential than someone with 500. It's literally just the numbers. But then there's was it CCV or whatever, like concurrent viewer numbers. That's what most Twitch streamers care about, and why you will send a VTuber spiraling into a panic attack if you tell them they've been losing viewers this stream, or call out their numbers in any way sometimes, because a lot of streamers, especially VTubers who because of being VTubers, are sequestered in this space of heightened self-awareness and slash or vanity, being aware of just how you are or are not being seen can be kind of anxiety inducing in the moment, especially if you know you're like, oh, I'm losing them. Actually, right now, I actually cannot easily see how many people are watching, which feels so lucky. Especially because our numbers have not been good this year. Doesn't mean that our work isn't impactful, but our brain does tell us that it matters less because the number is lower. But when number higher means you dehumanize people because they're way too famous to have problems, that's when paying attention to numbers has gone way too far. I tried talking to people about my poor health, how I needed to withdraw and have space. After unfollowing most people related to games, a subject which was quickly becoming a trigger, I was told that I was manipulative for unfollowing. And my following list on Twitter was scrutinized and brought up as evidence that I still follow certain games, people, and that I was doing this to hurt people. I was pressured not to post about certain things I cared about, crystals, slime, and not to use my favorite emoticons. I was pressured to join in social media smearings of other trans people, which I frequently rebelled against to my detriment, and to retweet things I didn't want to retweet. I really like reading this article and being reminded that not every person who is spouting, say, anti-beliefs, or who is, you know, vehemently canceling whatever queer artist this week is doing it because they, in their hearts, feel this way. And although the results are the same as someone who does have that, like, prejudice in their hearts or whatever, or that vindictiveness, or that feeling of justified anger, at least knowing that this happens, that there are people out here who are trying to rile people up explicitly, and not just like right-wingers, it's sort of a relief. It's sort of a relief. It's a reminder that like, not everyone's actually a brick wall. But I will say that if you want to have a constructive conversation with a person about something that, especially in an intercommunity sense, can be divisive, don't have it on the super public internet. Maybe a Discord server, but probably DMs. If you want someone not to be looking over their shoulder the entire time, worried that they'll say the wrong thing and need to perform being insulted, or perform caring that much. My Twitter was incompatible with the rest of the network because I mainly posted poetry-style tweets that had no connection to anything else. I would be accused of subtweeting or encoding hidden messages into my tweets. People would associate random words in my tweets with some random thing going on in their life. and that I surely must be commenting on. Social media became a scientific metric for my abusers, a set of numbers and behaviors to obsess over, and divine hidden messages. The games that were constantly abraded against my non-participation, my desire for a safe, therapeutic online space, not a competitive one. Feminist practice of declaring privilege and marginalization became a way to collect information about victims. Look at someone's profile bar for their elemental weakness. This one is just a being on the internet fear, I think, at this point. It's not just like I mean, obviously it's the more visible you are, the more likely it is. And if you are highly visible talking about vulnerable shit, then that's especially going to make this worse. And I definitely am not trying to say, oh, it happens to everyone, it's not a big deal. Quite the opposite. It is one of the worst things about the internet, or one of the worst tendencies, that people will literally look at your profile. People will look at your profile, look at your do not interact, and I'm not a proponent of do not interacts, to be clear. Someone will go to your bio, look at your do not interact, and send you photos of the thing you've labeled do not interact, to give like a petty trolly sort of thing. People will literally send hate mail to like YouTubers in the context of things that they know upset them based on topics that the YouTubers talked about. It's fucked. It's fucked. And video game framing is usually our go-to, and this is some of the most succinct video game symbolism and framing for this. Look at someone's profile bar for their elemental weaknesses. Fucking insane. Being frank about my health problems was never an advantage for me in feminist spaces, only something to be used against me. I was an object, an invalid on a bed that could be infinitely manipulated and extruded through social media to fit the agendas of 1,000 bored strangers. Mouthwashing moments. The ethereal potential of the net had become rigidly hierarchized and numbered to the point where I could be managed and controlled as efficiently as if I were in a 3D space. Mobbing. Call out culture as ritual disposability. Feminist / queer spaces are more willing to criticize people than abusive systems because they reserve the right to use those systems for their own purposes. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like the argument of, oh, but if we criticize cops, who will we call when we need to have the cops hurt someone? Of course, there are legitimate reasons to want to call the cops, though most situations literally do not need violent intervention. And I mean, honestly, that's not what most people are looking for. I mean, they want to be safe, generally, I would hope. I mean, obviously, there are a lot of people who weaponize law enforcement, but wanting help in a bad situation is not in and of itself bad. But yeah, it's certainly liberal behavior, but it definitely happens even without someone being a lib, that they'll want to use the system to their own benefit and to someone else's detriment, even though they recognize it as bad when it's used against them. At least attacking people can be politically viable, especially in a token system where you benefit directly by their absence, or where your status as a good feminist is dependent on constantly rooting out evil. When the bounty system calls for the ears of evil people, well, most people have a fucking ear. When I used to curate games, I was approached by people in that abusive community who pressured me not to cover a game by a trans woman. Their reasoning was blatant jealousy, disguised under thin, nauseating film of pretext that covers nearly everything people say about trans people. When I rejected their reasoning and covered the game, the targeting ridicule of disposability turned towards me. What can we learn from this? Besides, lofty processes in queer slash feminist spaces are nearly always about some embarrassingly petty shit. It's about the ritual nature of disposability, which has nothing to do with deserving it. Disposability has to happen on a regular basis, like forest fires, keeping nature in balance. So when people write all those apologist articles about call out culture and other instruments of violence and feminism, I don't think they understand that the people who most deserve those things can usually shrug off the effects, and the normalization of that violence inevitably trickles down and affects the weak. Is as predictable as water. Criminal justice applies punishment under the conceit of blind justice. But we see the results. Prisons are flooded with the most vulnerable, and the rich can buy their way out of any problem. In activist communities, these processes allow a similar pragmatism. Punishment is not something that happens to bad people, it happens to those who cannot stop it from happening. It is laundered pain, not a balancing of scales. If a man does something fucked up, all he has to do is apologize. If that, for feminists to re-embrace him. If a trans femme talks about something fucked up that happened to her, she's told to leave and never fucking come back. Common punishment for infanticide in the Middle Ages was living burial. This was a feminine coded punishment, often reserved for women. One that allowed execution without having to actually be there at the moment of death. This line of thought pervades feminine punishment to this day. One of the most common tools of exclusion is through mobbing, which is rarely talked about because, unlike rape, murder, etc., it's not easily dependent on a single person or scapegoat. Mobbing is emotional abuse practiced by a group of people, usually peers, over a period of time, through methods such as gaslighting, rumor mongering, and ostracism. It's most documented in workplace or academic environments, key points of capitalist tension, but is thoroughly institutionalized into feminist, queer, and radical spaces as well. Here's why it is horrible. 1. It has an unusually strong power to damage the victim's relationship to society, because it can be written off as an outlier, as some singular monster. It reveals a fundamental truth about people that makes it difficult to trust ever again. People become like aliens, like a pack of animals that can turn on you as soon as some mysterious pheromone shift marks you for death. The more we've read this one, the more our brain reacts to it, because I feel like that perfectly describes the fear that we've had. Last week, someone asked Fantasia if if she feared that people would, based on like our interests and kinks, think we want to hurt children or something. And it's like, yeah, we do fear that. Of course we do. How can someone not? I mean, when as little as being queer can mark you as that. And there is a sense of like certain words or phrases being used, and it immediately souring a conversation that was happening in good faith, in a similar way that like if you're having a conversation with like the average person or a lay person in terms of like say like leftist politics or communism or something, you can more than likely easily get someone to agree with like like free healthcare for all, or even a universal basic income. But as soon as you use words like communism or shit, even unions, they might react badly because of how those things have been propagandized to be bad. And I guess in that same way, not knowing what place someone is coming from, it can be really scary that you'll have a conversation with them about something and it can just turn sideways so easily. And it makes you feel like you don't have a good grasp on human behavior or whatever, and it certainly increases the desire to isolate because you never know when someone will act, at least from the perspective of the person on the receiving end of this switch, as like in a logical happening that cannot be predicted. Of course, there are certain things that can be predicted based on the context of the quote unquote pheromone shift. But in the end, and we've definitely experienced this when we've had conversations go sideways, and sometimes the going sideways isn't someone feeling unsafe around us or being friends with us or being in community with us even. Well, maybe the last part. But we've even had it once where someone was essentially having a like an anxiety attack or a meltdown based on the fear and guilt they felt based on the not necessarily punishment from like how people might feel that they weren't like necessarily jumping on a bandwagon of this thing is bad, but more in that same way of if this makes for this to make sense, I have to be bad. Their acceptance of oh, you can like be into certain things and you know it doesn't reflect on your character or your morality necessarily, but still feeling like shit and having this catch 22 of but the zeitgeist or like the general vibe in the room says that I can't support this or that I can't be okay with this. If I'm okay with this, then I am bad. And that has reverberated through us. We don't just fear the pheromone shift of oh now this person is like you know aggressive towards us. We fear the pheromone shift of we have just made this person feel fear for their life because for them to in any way be in community with us once they've been quote unquote compromised uh then they have to recognize the real the real possibility of their own social death, you know, because the ridicule turns to those who don't comply. And that's fucking terrifying. The insidious nature of emotional abuse. Oh, sorry. The context of these. Uh, Wow, this is a long sentence. Mobbing is an emotional abuse practiced by a group of people, usually peers, over a period of time through methods such as gaslighting, rumor mongering, and ostracism. It's often documented in workplace or academic environments, but is thoroughly institutionalized in the feminist, queer, and radical spaces as well. Here is why it is horrible. Yes, the pheromone shift, and not trusting people. And two, insidious nature of emotional abuse. How do you fight ostracism and rumors? They leave no bruises, they just starve you. Mobbing typically occurs in places where the victim is trapped by some need or obligation, work, school, circle of friends. This can prolong exposure to damaging extremes. For these reasons, PTSD is an almost inevitable outcome for any protracted mobbing case. In ideological spaces, the damage is exacerbated by the fact that the victims are often earnest people who take their ideas to heart and can understand why the culture is going contrary to its own messages. They appease, self-incriminate, blame themselves, anything to be a good person. They don't want to fight. Fighting sickens them. Fighting is scary. Fighting is very scary. Even for us. Pushing back. Oof. From a report by the Australian House of Representatives Education and Employment Committee, 90% of people being bullied make the comment, I just want it to stop. They don't want to go down a formal path, just want the behavior to stop. Those who participate, even unwillingly, feel compelled to invest in the narrative of victims as monsters in order to protect their self perception as a good person. Group violence creates group culpability. For their ego, they trade the career, health, and community, and sometimes life of the victim. Mobbing is witch hunts. One lesson we can draw from the return of witch hunting is that this form of persecution is no longer bound to a specific historic time. It is taken life of its own, so that the same mechanisms can be applied to different societies whenever they, whether they are people whether there are people in them that have to be ostracized and dehumanized. Witchcraft accusations, in fact, are the ultimate mechanism of alienation and estrangement, as they turn the accused, still primarily women, into monstrous beings, dedicated to the destruction of their communities, therefore making them undeserving of any compassion and solidarity. Silvia Federici. That's a good that's a good quote. It's a pretty good quote. I can't say anything bad. Well, I mean, the reality of what it's describing is bad, but like, very good, very good, very good analysis of uh that occurrence. Ugh. The term witch hunt is thrown around a lot, but let's look at it what it really means. Witch hunts, as described by Silvia Federici, were responses to shifts in capital accumulation, as is slavery, to jury rig the perpetual self-destructing machine of capitalism. Huge amounts of violence are required to obtain captive labor, femme and non-white. The effect is to devalue our labor as much as possible and to destroy the bonds between marginalized people. You see this in games and tech spaces where the intense amounts of competition and capital accumulation, both physical and social, are a breeding ground for mobbing. But the popular two-sided discussion of mobbing as carried out in numerous clickbait articles ignores the fact that mobbing goes all the way down. Even as white cis women struggle for safety, they participate in the exclusion of others, creating a hierarchy of labor and competition, because mobbing is a form of capitalist violence. The popular discussion, conducted by those who are intrinsically intertwined with the flow of capital, must omit the nuances of mobbing in favor of a narrative that is about replacing uncool, regressive, masculine consumerism with liberal feminist consumerism. When people are scapegoated happen to be from the most disadvantaged backgrounds, the culture calls it coincidence, clutching our respectable counterparts to their chests like pearls, a talisman of tokens to ward away reality. Sexual menace. I saw a queer black woman struggling to survive by her art, falsely accused of rape by a white queer. The call out was extremely vague and loaded with strong words designed to elicit vigilante justice. Immediately, hundreds of other white queers jumped on the bandwagon. Many of them likely didn't know either of the people involved. Accusations of sexual menace are a key weapon used against marginalized people in feminist spaces because they arouse people's disgust like no other act. The threat of black skin on innocent white, of trans bone structures on ethereal cis skeletons. It's as common for many of us as catcalling or any other form of ubiquitous harassment the cis feminists talk about, except no one wants to talk about it. It's a way for the dominant people in the group to take us aside and say, "You are not welcome here," or "Do this thing you don't want to do or I'll ruin your life." But frequently it happens without any particular thesis, just as a general tool to keep us destabilized and vulnerable. Don't forget who you really are in the unspoken hierarchy. I think a lot of this coercion makes me like hyper aware of the thing that's been going around recently, especially like when November hit and everyone knew that the president who was going to be president was going to be president, and a phrase started going around of "don't comply in advance Also, I think that was part of our problem as well. Complying in advance of being told that we've done harm and being held in a space that made it hard for us to um, function, let alone work towards uh, being healthier. Um, in the midst of that, were kind of we felt kind of like in limbo. I think that the desire to comply in advance is very much like a fawning thing. It's something that we've fallen into a lot of times. I feel like it kind of goes into that thing of like it'll be better if you apologize, if you know, like come clean, tell the truth, you know, be honest, be vulnerable, you know, that sort of thing. But just like how some people say that people like prey on a certain amount of visible vulnerability, or people might take advantage of someone's excessive kindness. Um, if someone wanted you to do a thing or was already going to be leaning positive towards you doing a thing that helps them and hurts you, and excuse me, and you're complying in advance, they're not gonna say, "Wow, you're complying in advance. You know you don't have to do that, right?" No, they're gonna be like, "Yeah, you should." And for those of us who want to please, who want to be better, who want to who want to prostrate ourselves in order to make things right, um, it's tempting. It's tempting to not just go, "Oh, wait, if I do what I know they want to do before they even ask, then it'll be fine, or at least it'll be better, right?" In a lot of cases, not so much. Mobbing uses these rumors to trade a vague suspicion of the actual reality of violence. It's like turning the corner and watching someone on the street having their teeth kicked in by a mob who assures you that just before you appeared, this person had committed some mysterious act which justifies limitless brutality. Damage. PTSD as disposability alchemy. I was, in fact, beaten until I had brain damage. For a long period of time. Unlike some other survivors of trauma, I was unable to heal because I was never spared from the source of the danger. I was never given the chance to vent, to express myself, to tell my side of the story. But I had to keep working, harder than ever, while being constantly exposed to violence. The pressure on me was not merely to survive, but to display no signs of the incredible amounts of damage pouring into me daily, to never display the slightest hint of anger, to never cry, to not argue with people telling me horrible things. Every hint of damage was an excuse to further isolate and demonize me. The cost of resisting disposability was PTSD. It was catching a lethal amount of negative energy with my body and becoming a poison processing factory. My job is wired to give me electrical shocks. What do you do when your alternative is homelessness? The allostatic load is the wear and tear on the body, which grows over time when the individual is exposed to repeated or chronic stress. Stress hormones such as epinephrine and cortisol, in combination with other stress mediating physiological agents such as increased myocardial workload, decreased smooth muscle tone in the gastrointestinal tract, and increase coagulation effects, have protective and adaptive benefits in the short term, yet can accelerate pathophysiology when they are overproduced or mismanaged. This kind of stress can cause hypertension and lead to heart disease. Constant or even irregular exposure to these hormones can eventually induce illness and weaken the body's immune system. To cover up the abuse and protect the reputation of the games industry, it was deemed worthwhile to lower my lifespan, weaken my immune system, and permanently damage my body. Woof. Even if I drink multiple cups of water before bed, I wake up with severe dehydration. An interesting side effect of being trans from all hormones is that spironolactone, an anti-androgen, is a diuretic, so the dehydrating effects of stress are added to the dehydration effects of my gender. Oh yeah, I forgot about that. Tipping it over to agonizing extremes, the unspoken tax of pursuing both gender and a career. The amount of water in my body is political. This article has a lot of good one-liners. Iferefenine can smooth the gastrointestinal tract? Apparently. This, Actually, this is not the first I'm hearing of it. We've read this article like 4 or 5 times at this point. I wake up feeling burnt, damaged, corroded. I crawl up from an insane, nauseating, unreal pit and slowly come back to the world. I have constant headaches. By the end of the day, my neck and left arm are aching from nervous tics. I forget things rapidly. Triggers leave me exhausted and panicking at inconvenient times, sometimes for days or weeks. My hair fell out in handfuls. I still have a nervous tic of running my hands through my hair to pull out loose strands. Having PTSD is like breaking a limb and never being able to rely on it as strongly. The sudden weakness of standing on it felt wrong. Suddenly being unable to hold something. A fatigue and spasm of nerves. It became difficult to diagnose other medical problems because of the all-consuming nature of the symptoms. It became difficult to talk about what happened to my body in general. When my hairdresser asked, the only way to explain the damage was by saying I had been in a car accident. Attacks on marginalized artists go beyond merely denying them access to networks. They also damage a person's faculties of expression. For a long time, PTSD deprived me of the privilege of being a multi-temporal being. The space of time I was able to safely think about shrunk to about a minute. Larger projects, the kind most tied to communal value and to the media coverage apparatus, were difficult for me due to the traumatic potential of expanding my aperture of time. The diversity-centric system expects more jobs to fix the problem, ignoring how long we've been damaged and made unfit for their jobs. They encourage a strong woman stereotype because it means taking the damage onto themselves. We need more jobs and we need more social reintegration. I think the encouraging the strong woman stereotype because it means taking damage onto ourselves really reminds me of a big critique of dialectical behavioral therapy, which is something that has at least the philosophy of it and like reading and like working through it and I guess in a workbook form CBT has helped us tremendously. However, we recognize what some people criticize about it, especially in the value that is placed on it by power structures, because it is something that a dialectical behavioral therapy generally, I guess if it's successful, will allow a person a greater degree of like emotional and mental resiliency, to be able to see things like from more than one or like from 2 angles at once, a dialectical like two, not having like a binary view of things, you know. And especially when it has to do with, you know, some of the BPD-ish tendencies of like, you know, these strong emotional reactions of fearing abandonment, of uh, these factors that make you feel like you're standing on uneven ground emotionally all the time, and then one more hit will KO you. um, there is a value from like the capitalist perspective of just having more emotionally resilient workers even as times become hard, because a big thing about DBT is also the awareness of the power you hold, and like a lot of it has to do with like that sort of philosophy you might find of I can only control myself or my reactions to things. It can lead to a sort of um radical taking the burden of bad things happening onto yourself, and uh in a toxic way it is kind of what led us to continuously question our own shit, I guess. We weren't thinking dialectically in that case, we were thinking binarily, that only one thing could be possible at a time, the only we could have done harm, and that we deserved any response to that harm or to that toxicity. Um, and in a similar way, DBT can, or sorry, CBT, no, DBT, um, DBT can make someone more willing to put up with, say, institutional bullshit of like just unfair things in their lives, people being unhospitable, because, you know, in a way it's like being the bigger person therapy. It does have a lot to do with a certain type of maturity that we highly value, but to its purpose when cognitive behavioral therapy's purpose when it is encouraged to be used in the medical field by the capitalist class is essentially telling on themselves, in the sense that it's not because it's really good at like, you know, its goals of making people more functional, unless it has to do with making them more functional to do work. You see, if you see where I'm going with it. So just like that, anything that encourages marginalized people to put up with the bullshit that is thrown at them constantly is going to be valued, because it is a way to keep things the way that they are externally, while just encouraging people to change the way they look at things, you know. Not to say that the changing your perception about things is bad. Like I said, cognitive behavioral therapy has certainly been a big help to us. Maybe one of the reasons that we're alive, even. I've gone to doctors multiple times, and they said they found nothing wrong with me. Really? Nothing wrong with you? Now you know that's malpractice. I don't know. I mean, from a mental health perspective is what I'm kind of talking about. I don't know like what physical things you may have going on, Jen, but like I don't know. When you get abused, you tend to pick up PTSD, so I would imagine you have at least that. Though I think when you have like certain physical ailments that are being caused psychosomatically. Not to say that is what you're experiencing, but sometimes those things do happen. Unfortunately, some people, including doctors, might assume that all of your symptoms are psychosomatic instead of just some of them. Communication, inability to share stigma. Traumatic events destroy the sustaining bonds between individual and community. Those who have survived learn that their sense of self, of worth, of humanity depends upon feeling a connection to others. The solidarity of a group provides the strongest protection against terror and despair, and the strongest antidote to traumatic experience. Trauma isolates. The group recreates a sense of belonging. Trauma shames and stigmatizes. The group bears witness and affirms. Trauma degrades the victim. The group exalts her. Trauma dehumanizes the victim. The group restores her humanity. Judith Herman, Trauma and Recovery. Oh yeah, I forgot that there was these really good quotes in this article. Like fucking Christ. I can only imagine how her skin was on fire writing all this. I mean, going back to the beginning, what was it? I am too sick to write this article. That the writing about my injuries is like performing an interpretive dance after breaking every bone in my body. Yeah, rough time. It also sucks that the burden of understanding also lays on victims. It is overwhelmingly victims who have to contextualize and contextualize and recontextualize and explain and re-explain and reframe for people to understand what happens and for people to have access to empathy sometimes. It's enough to make you want to give up on connection while at the same time recognizing that you need to be connected with others, that you need community to survive, to not even just to survive, to live. I mean, it's the canaries in the coal mines that are putting on the like longest fucking TED talks, and then getting sent deeper into the mines. The worst thing is not having other survivors to commiserate with. I can think of people who went through similar situations and were defeated, reintegrated. Their stories are paraded through feminist spaces, saturated through social media, and every time I'm exposed to them, I feel less safe, not more. This enhances my feelings of dehumanization. Why was I not worth protecting in the exact same situation? I must not be human like them. I also have the overwhelming physical sensations of having a dead person in my life, someone as close as an identical twin. The sensation is of me being the only one still alive after a terrible accident, lingering like an unshriven thing. The inability to share stigma is even worse than the original act of violation. The greater part of a wound is in its inability to heal. I think that's why also we feel like certain things that we've been soapboxy about. We've been more soapboxy about, like, say, the Lowly Show stuff, like in our personal spaces or in a lot less visible spaces. And I think part of that is obviously, you know, not wanting to open ourselves up so much to harassment by just having like a bunch of like blue sky threads or something about it. Also, like reaching people that way, I think with something like that is a little bit ineffective. Um, but also like you feel like when you've held it in for so long and you've seen all the stuff and you have like all these takes and you feel like something in you has like curdled and you feel like there's an amount of salt on your tongue when you talk about the stuff because it's been inside you for so long. Um, it tends to not come out in the best ways or in the best explained ways. Or it comes out more often than you would like, or the people around you would like, because you feel the need to get out of your system. And it's something that we've been trying to be aware of. But also, we've been a little bit tiptoey about it because we also like really value other people's comfortability and want to make people as comfortable as possible before getting into these tough topics. Despite the fact that like the space that we've been trying to build community wise and with our brand and stuff has had something to do with having hard, nuanced conversations sometimes, and giving people the benefit of the doubt and listening to them, and understanding that things aren't simple. But that fear still happens, and as much as a lot of people, even some furries, would loathe to truly to themselves admit, humans are animals. We react in certain predictable ways based on certain circumstances. Doesn't mean we don't have individuality, but we certainly we have a track record for reacting certain ways, especially in the context of some of the stuff we're talking about here, where it's like you get traumatized and then you seek to not be traumatized, so you want to find an in group to protect you from being traumatized, and then you fear ostracization because you know it will lead to more trauma and perhaps even death. And talking about the stuff that upsets us sometimes, especially when it's not like the capital the capital the capital L like big stuff the leftists are talking about, sometimes makes us feel like we are like diverting attention away from the stuff that people should be talking about, as if a diversity of thought and like praxis or intention or even a diversity of theory topics isn't fucking important, because it is. I mean, even beyond just the simple thing of sometimes someone just needs a space to like let that stuff out. um would you believe that part of the reason I'm even talking about this on stream was a fucking post of someone complaining about the insincerity of people who tell queers that they don't agree with that they should just get therapy, or queers think they're gross often as well, because we also have a bone to pick with people who go, you should get therapy, because it's a way to trivialize and write people off, and usually does not come from a place of actual care. And even sometimes when it does, it comes from such a place of ignorance that it's incredibly insulting and not at all useful. One can now approximate to recurrent chronic gastrointestinal pain. Oh, I see. Oh yeah, like panic attacks, increased cortisol, like all that stuff. Yeah, totally. I hate that the doctors didn't even think about that. I mean, I don't want to say that's the exact sort of context that we got uh, diagnosed with like generalized anxiety disorder, but you know, where there's smoke, there's fire in a lot of cases, or at least something you should look for. Do you think our experience with the local ADBL scene constitutes abuse? I think that's a hard question for me to answer, and I guess the important thing for us personally when faced with the situation of, was XYZ that I experienced abuse, I want to say, what do you think? Not to say that I don't want to engage with the concepts of what you're saying, because I definitely do. But more so, I want to say like your opinion of it matters too. And in a weird way, even if I say that it's not, that doesn't mean that I'm right. Or at least it's not, even if it's not what I believe, that doesn't mean that that is going to be compatible with your truth. Now, within the context of what we're reading, I feel a certain, I feel like the vibe in the room right now would be to say yes, unequivocally, yes. However, I think that I think that you should also keep in mind like what you think and how you value things. I never want to encourage someone to go, no, it's the children who are wrong, type shit. You know, where it's like you can't admit any sort of like wrongdoing or fault or like fuck up, like that would suck. Um, but at the same time, I think that you should value your own context and your own experience as well. And I know I figure that is something you struggle with, and believing that you're right-headed about things, that you're not just being like a toxic shitheel. We've struggled with some of those same things. Why we recognize that and resonate with what you are saying. Literally the very last therapist we had a conversation about um, not such a community based occurrence of what could be considered abuse, but something more, a lot closer, a lot more individual and personal. So the context is a little bit different, but I remember we had a conversation where upon us being like, hey, was this thing that happened to us abuse? His answer kind of create a paradigm shift in us, because it wasn't just that he was like, well, do you think it was abuse? It was also the recognition that we soon had of, we really wanted someone to tell us that it was. It can be very liberating, especially like in the as a as a survivor of abuse. I would say that it is one near universal experience of abused people, or many abused people, I will say, is the recognition of someone else to something that's happened to you that you have either maybe repressed, or you're framed in a way that allows you to cope with it while not really taking into full account the weight of the thing. Of you telling it like a funny story, or maybe you venting about it, but venting about it like in the same way you might vent about the weather, and someone like taking a beat and going, wait, really? Or that's fucked up. Some way in which something that happened to you, or something that reflects something that happened to you, triggers a disgust response, or a response of being just being upset based on something that happened to you that you didn't realize was as heavy a topic or an occurrence as it was. A lot of this article originally for us has been that. Um, and there are little ways that that happens, and I think that having those moments is valuable, and part of that is having that outside perspective, because we do seek outside perspectives, and that's what we did to recognize like our context of like, okay, like I want as many perspectives on this as possible to recognize where my blind spots are, because nuance. But when we realized, when talking to that therapist, that we wanted someone to give us a to give us permission to not just say it was our fault. That we wanted permission to be able to think from a place that was that didn't start from the premise of we started on the wrong foot. It was groundbreaking for us. It changed everything, and things still suck in our brain. We're still very traumatized, and there's a lot of stuff that we still need to like figure out. And the way we want to navigate it is certainly not the way a lot of people want to navigate it, I'm sure. But all that being said, I think that if you feel that it was, then I think that that's important to hold and keep in mind. Um, Even if it doesn't match onto everyone's view of like community, like a community abusing an individual, it certainly wasn't fair or right, as I understand it. You may want to reiterate the context of your experiences, but generally, if I remember correctly, it wasn't you just being a jerk, I'll say. I would consider their leader abusive for several reasons and overall staff neglectful, but also recognize where I went wrong. Then you're on the right track, I think. Personal responsibility is not bad, but it's also good to not hoist all that responsibility onto yourself, especially when you're an individual and is more than just a single individual who may have instigated things or made things inhospitable in whatever way. And it's funny, I have not even talked a lot about ADBL stuff because the like Lily Show stuff is the stuff that we're currently in processing of. The ADBL stuff, like we spent a long time processing like morality surrounding that. Even though like there are people who still react to it in very same and similar ways, and there's still lots of ways we need to navigate that. I mean, we had the whole presentation about stuff happening with our affinity and Patreon, and the increased scrutiny and like fear mongering of like certain like kinks and like sexual practices, and the depictions of them in media, and how small artists can even be allowed to be visible and show off their work and maybe even get paid for it. Like that's a whole thing. It has a lot to do with lots of other things besides like our particular target of critical interest right now, in terms of like stuff that people would get dogpiled over. But like ADBL still gets so ABDL by itself. Even people who are doing like a safer work version of it, even people who are in the agery community, for example, specifically or whatever. Whew. Yeah, it's not a fun time. Not a fun time. Still people are getting scapegoated left and right. It's still a an extra cherry on top of like a call out post. Still not a great place to be in terms of acceptance, I think, um in the grand scheme of things. Why was I not worth protecting in the exact same situation? I must not be human like them. I often have the overwhelming physical sensation of having a dead person in my life, someone as close to an identical twin. The sensation is of me being the only one still alive after a terrible accident, lingering like an unshriven thing. The inability to share stigma is even worse than the original act of violation. The greater part of a wound is its inability to heal. Inadmissible narratives of abuse number one. The number of narrative of abuse on social media doesn't include the problems of the most vulnerable, like how public verbal harassment may only be an ultimately minor part of a trans film's exile. The most skilled abusers know what a good exile that a good exile is done with pure silence through the whisper network by having the person wake up one day and have every second or third person she knows or who practices her profession block her and or stop talking to her. No one tells her why. She has to painstakingly talk to every friend, every contact, every person who would normally have a cheerful conversation with. The electric shocks of knowing that every simple human interaction you have with a friend or stranger could turn into a nightmare of victim blaming or worse. A cold iciness where they pretend nothing is wrong. Imagine repeating that experience hundreds and hundreds of times with no way to end it. After the noise, the long years of silence are what kills us. The back channels that should be used to protect people from abusers and rapists are instead used to protect abusers and rapists. Any usefulness these channels have is reserved for real women. No one warned me about any of the comically large number of predators in my professions. I was considered unrapeable, unabusable, not worthy of protection. A trans femme can try to talk about her experiences of abuse for years and have no one listen. But the instant one of her abusers smears her, everyone is alert and awake. Ain't that right? Holy fuck, this is literally what I went through. Oh, huh. Do you think that you were abused? One reason it took me so sorry, that was a leading question after the conversation. I'm being sarcastic. But I do think it's important to have your own processing, and I'm glad that this is helping you recontextualize what's happened. One reason it took me so long to talk about my experiences that I was associated. Sorry. One reason it took me so long to talk about my experiences was that I associated being able to speak against abuse with being an abuser. Because every abuser throughout my life was so good at being believed, I thought that being believed was an exclusive domain of abusers. This is why my first months in therapy were spent convincing me that I wasn't a psychopath, crazy, abusive, or any of the other terms I had been brainwashed with. Abusers don't spend years disabled by these thoughts because they don't care if they hurt other people. There is a certain sort of language that work that we resonate with. Very much catches with us that we aren't always fully on board with. That game that we really liked, Blast Damage Days, had a similar moment. And it's just like this sense of essentializing abusers in one way or another. And as someone who legitimately thought of themselves as an abuser and was trying their best to, fix themselves, I think that it's interesting because on one hand, within the context that I just spoke about, our own context, or within the context we spoke about our own experience, one could use that last sentence to say, well, obviously you weren't an abuser because you wouldn't be disabled by these thoughts. Because, what this last sentence is kind of implying that abusers do not have remorse. I don't believe that. And BoJack Horseman as a show feels like a huge testament and a huge pillar in our life to like a philosophical inquiry of that line of thinking. Not to say that this isn't a valuable things to talk about. And in terms of this person's truth, and say with the context of saying something as strong language as brainwashing, which some people might go, oh, that's really strong language. And I mean, it is. I try never to use the term brainwashing, even when I'm talking about people being indoctrinated by right-wing conspiracy theories. Because brainwashing to me has a connotation of almost science fiction, of mind control. And you can deteriorate someone's mind. You can certainly make someone more willing to comply with stuff. But like brainwashing, how like the concept of brainwashing for us in that term is so loaded that it almost has like a cartoon level of weight when used in a conversation like this. Though also, victims are going to be more likely to use very strong language to get their point across, especially if they have a history of not being believed. And we will definitely choose strong words when talking about stuff that happened to us and the effects of that stuff. And I'm saying us not just in the sense of saying, yeah, like I'm a victim or whatever, but or a survivor. That's the more like person first language type of respectable term for that. But like I think it's tricky. I think it's tricky because I think that survivors should have space to be able to use that strong language. And for like something like this is highly visible on the internet, to not be criticized too heavily for that strong language in the context of, you know, recognizing the harm that's been done and how people react to it and how people talk when they're talking about something that is so that has such a strong effect on like their life and stuff. And it does feel that strong in that cartoon way, especially looking backwards and being like, how did I believe that I was this evil person? You know, it does feel like being brainwashed in that context that I just mentioned. Like when I say the word, I'm immediately imagining like fucking Woody the Woodpecker, like in front of like a screen of TVs, like 28 days later with like eyes, like you know, forcibly opened up. But people can be conditioned slowly into accepting things that they would not accept if they were thrown into the deep end of like these bad experiences. You know, so it's not to. I definitely don't want to attempt to trivialize the role that gaslighting plays. Um, Nor do I want to make it out to seem as though abusers, especially ones that are not trying to become better or trying to not be abusive, um, don't have plans and aren't like choosing to do fucked up shit. Like ignoring like a sense of morality, especially like in, you know, feminist spaces. I mean, obviously, there's people who believe their own bullshit, and that's very often the case. But I would like to say that, despite the fact that our tune has changed on like our individual like how we individually see what's happened with us in our past, we still want to hold the things that we've learned from that. And one of those things that we learned is that like because of the inextricable links between like suffering abuse and the maladaptive behaviors that either lead to doing similar abuse, that can lead to doing similar abuse yourself, or just, you know, being wrong-headed or holding very strong possibly toxic opinions about things, like say a victim who like a victim of CSA who is uncomfortable with any sort of neoteny in fiction that reminds them of their own abuse, and feeling as though people who are say like age players or, you know, Lonely Shadow fans are like bad people doesn't mean that they're not valid in their pain, you know. But if someone were to, I don't know, be abused by their husband and then get really famous writing a bunch of children's books and decide that the abuse that she suffered meant that it was justifiable to label an entire group of people as groomers and people who are trying to steal the rights of women for themselves. Doesn't mean that like the suffering that that person suffered is inconsequential. Certainly, but at the same time, it doesn't mean that they weren't. It doesn't mean that they never have second doubts. It doesn't mean that it doesn't mean that how to put this simply so I can move on. Not every abuser is like Yagami. Some abusers are like flying by the seat of their pants and reacting immediately to the things in front of them, or like was talked about in this article before, people bandwagoning on abusive behaviors because they fear that they will be the targets of harassment and abuse if they do not comply and they not join in. But then again, I could be splitting hairs because by that same logic, someone could even go, well, these people are being used as tools for abuse and they're not being abusers themselves. But at that point, then it is it becomes a little bit too semantical to be useful in my opinion. Though I did feel very strongly about that sentence. I also think that on the other hand, it sometimes it kind of lets abusers off the hook to say that they would not have like remorse or second thoughts or guilt, because the second a human being has those things, they might go, oh, I have remorse and guilt, that means I'm a good person. I think that's literally a BoJack Horseman like a BoJack Horseman scene. Like sometimes one thinks that thinking critically about their bad past behavior means that they've somehow processed it and that they won't do it again, or that they're it's okay actually because you know they were hurt. So it's something I wanted to call attention to. Oh, it's Sonny. Welcome, welcome. Hope the stream isn't too explosively triggering. God, I feel like the stream might be like a bazooka of triggers, honestly. I don't think my abusers will ever face any traditional or idealized form of justice. And the truest thing is accepting that and moving on with your scars is the way to go about it, however unfair it feels. I feel like that's a different tangent altogether. And that's scary that you have to come to accept that, because it'll tear you apart. It'll tear you apart. And I mean, like, even someone who in some people's eyes may like redeem themselves, like that doesn't mean that that harm is just erased, obviously. Someone could hurt you, go on to change how they treat people after reflecting on it. And they could even go and tell you that they personally wanted to let you know that they're not hurting people anymore and they're not going to treat people like they treated you. Even in that case, you might still want some fucking justice. And you might not get it. You probably won't. Especially if they're like protected in a way where they could easily say to you, I'm sorry I did this to you, and admit that they did it to you. But outside of that, they could easily just deny it up and down and live their life uh, without any shakeup, externally at least. It's it's a rough place to be, especially because to one degree, we want to make things right. Although a lot of times making things right can feel like it should come from a place of revenge, even if it's not. And that's also something that I think comes up where it's like if someone is seeking to like blow the whistle or make someone's abuse visible, they might be seen as trying to gain favor, trying to look cool, that sort of thing, trying to steal that person's fame, or something like that. Um, and even in situations where someone might be believed, at least in a general sense, or maybe the person being called out is known to be like an asshole and it wouldn't be a stretch for them to have done it, there can still be a level of it getting written off and responsibility just not being there, even if everyone's kind of like, yeah, he probably did it, because people can get insulated from that, can get insulated by like privilege and power. Gosh, I feel like we've veered so far outside. Well, I think I'm still within reasonable tangents, but gosh, I feel like it's been going on for so long. 2 hours and 40 minutes. It's so easy to talk about this sort of shit for 3 to 4 hours, like fucking clockwork. Should have known, honestly. Okay, I'm not gonna speed run this, but I am going to try not to go quite as slow. Though I will be still responding to everyone. Yeah, it is hard to read. I'm almost at the bottom of the page. Inadmissible narratives of abuse number 2. And when verbal harassment does occur, it often is cloaked in feminist language, making it impossible to fight. If they call a woman a bitch, people comprehend that as misogyny, but they call trans femmes things that are harder to respond to: rapist, pedophile, male conditioning, etc. They call those things so bad that even denying them is destructive. Who wants to stand up in public and say they aren't those things? Who has the privilege to not get called those things in the first place? When I look at cis women these days, the first thing I think is, I bet no one ever casually called her a rapist. No notes? When I was really bad, I wrote, build the shittiest thing possible. Build out of trash because all I have is trash. Trash materials, trash bodies, trash brain syndrome. Build in the gaps between storms of chronic pain. Build inside the storms. Move a single inch and call it a victory. Mold my sexuality towards immobility. Lie here, leaking water from my eyes like a statue covered in melting frost. Zero affect. Build like moss grows. What? Build like moss grows. Build like crystals harden. Give up. Make your art the merest displacement of molecules at your slightest quiver. Don't build in spite of the body. Fail on their terms. Build with the body. Immaculate is boring and impossible. Health-based aesthetic. Wow. I feel like we're gonna be taking those vibes into our the visual novel we're making with Genesis. Very much where we're at. Also, this is reminding me of Menhura culture. If you're not aware of Menhura culture, it is like a Japanese. It's adjacent to like Japanese anime culture, like, and of course in America and the West, like weeaboos. specifically like mental healthness, or I shouldn't say mental healthness in the sense of, oh yes, we're all just very aware of our mental health and trying to be better. No, some would definitely say it's a romanticization of a mental illness specifically. If you're aware of that one game about being a streamer, needy streamer overload, the game is like Minhara stack all over. If you've ever seen a like an alt girl with like fucking cutesy band-aids and a bunch of like self-harm scars, that's Menhara. There's even a mascot of sorts, Menhara-chan, which is often there's a version of Menhara-chan that is often a cross post for like what was it, boy motor trans films, especially in like the anime space, or the anime fandom space, I should say. uh, and I mention all of this, not just build the shittiest thing possible. The build out of trash because trash is all I have. Trash materials, trash bodies, trash brain syndrome. This in particular got me thinking like this because, okay, so in the vibes of, oh, sometimes I prefer someone literally saying that I am like a piece of pos that has harmful who has harmful rhetoric, and they wouldn't trust them around, and they wouldn't trust me around their children. I sometimes would rather someone say that than the fucking the weird thing. It's not weird. I should say it's like condescending. The condescending thing of, oh, you're just hurt and confused, or oh, you're an abuse victim, and I feel so sorry that you've fallen into the lie that this is helping you. This is actually just hurting you, or whatever. It's the type of people who are like, yeah, tell your therapist about your weird kinks and see how fast they like report you, or tell you that you're like going down a road that'll like self-destruct you or something, you know. I think that when you have reasons to feel that things you like or your identity or whatever predisposes you to being a bad person, when you feel that the stories that you want to tell as an artist are not worth telling, or that maybe people will get too mad at you for telling them. I think about the creator of the Coffin of Andy and Lele, for example, especially with the increased harassment once someone thought that maybe the person was trans, and it's still not confirmed whether or not the developer of that game is or not, and it shouldn't fucking matter. However, there is there is a lot of there's a lot of fear of like creating problematic work, and there is this weird catch 22 because if where you're coming from is this, you know, trash bodies, trash brain place, if you have been abused in a lot of ways, if you picked up on like say if you are an abuse victim and you have like a consensual non-consent kink, for example, and you make a game exploring you know, non-consent and that sort of thing, then you might have the trouble of someone telling you that you shouldn't have made that game, or that you shouldn't have written that story, or at least it shouldn't have been public. And you're facing this thing of, maybe people say that it's okay for you to make this type of art, but it shouldn't be seen. And then you think to yourself, okay, well, I need to make art that can be seen. And you want to make art that can be seen and is like respectable or whatever, and doesn't like, you know, rub the community the wrong way, or is like an embarrassment or whatever. And you're sitting there making art that you're forcing yourself to make out of a need to be palatable. And I think that often enough you'll find that an artist doing that will not be putting their whole fucking foot in their work, because why would they? And in that sense, it's like it's a catch-22. On one hand, oh, I can make stuff that people will generally not, you know, like shit on, or at least shit on less than the stuff that I want to make. But then I'm not making earnest art, and someone might even not even be interested in it because they can tell, because you know sometimes people can tell when someone did not put their, when someone held back, when someone seemed to approach a line and then retreat back from it. And then so you lose in terms of that. Or heaven forbid you create something that's palatable and it pops off, and now you're stuck having to make palatable art to pay your bills, or being stuck and expected to make this extra palatable art, which was really supposed to just be a shield so you didn't get harassed. And when you're considering all this, it makes you hate yourself. At least it makes us have self-hate, because it's like, oh, I have a broken brain. If only my brain was better and I didn't want to create things that people would get mad at me for, you know? E-waste? Trash? Wait, how is what? Well, obviously you can't spell a word that you don't know. When I tell my therapist about my weird kinks, they say it sounds like it helps. When I tell aunties that, they say she's a bad therapist. That is a common that is actually a common refrain. There's a video that if we ever do like a video essay with sources about like problematic kinks and stuff like that, is something we're definitely going to talk about, because there's a video that we saw that was made by a therapist that was like, oh, this is like a bad thing to like say to or around people, of like, oh, my therapist is okay with like my this or that kink, and that it shows that the therapist isn't doing their due diligence or something. But then they put the context of, if I told my clients to indulge in problematic kinks for healing, then I would get in trouble. And then goes on to be like, their childhood like their childhood therapists, so all of their clients are children, and so it's like, yeah, of course you wouldn't, duh, like we're talking about adults and adult spaces. Like, it gets so, it gets so fucking asinine sometimes, because you try to have a like, you try to provide context that's like, hey, look, it's not as bad as you say. I actually went and talked to a therapist, and they were like, it is okay. And then they changed the fucking goalposts. I mean, it's many such cases. Because again, people who yell at you to go to therapy for being fucked up, even when the fucked up things are definitely things that you should be looking for outside help for, it's just not. They're not saying it for your benefit. They're saying it because they find you annoying, or not fun to be around, and they want you fixed, or they want whatever is wrong with you to be removed. They feel that therapy is how you get people to not do the one annoying thing that you don't like about them. In lots of cases, there are some cases that someone might actually be like, oh, therapy will really help you, though most people aren't committed to actually helping. It's just sort of a, and it becomes a microaggression, even if it's said in good faith. Yo, what up, Dan? Hi, Dust. Not feeling too good. Got a nasty cold. Oof. Well, make sure you drink enough fluids. Hope you can rest, and you don't have to like have a lot of responsibilities you need to stay on top of while you do that. Good to see you. Oh, Minhara. You're trying to figure out how to spell Minhara, Sani. Thank you. Well, I guess you know how to spell it now. Ugh. Chat moves faster than my intentions, man. I have a broken brain. If only I could stay sane and not hurt the people I love. Oh, sometimes we hurt the people we love. It's it's more likely when you do have that good old mental illness. Therapy about making you more normal. Yes, that is a thing. That seems to be the goal for a lot of people who say that online randomly about people that they don't like, in an intra-community way. Because let's be real, they should seek therapy or they need therapy is something that is plastered at pretty much anyone. You don't. It doesn't have to be specifically in the context that we've been talking about. I mean, we've seen it like thrown out right wingers and stuff like that too. And of course, there's conversations to be had about framing people who do evil shit as just mentally ill, like when people call the president a psychopath, for example, that sort of thing. Uh, it's like someone can be evil without being mentally ill. And evil is banal. Gotta remember that. Even there's even a banality to some of this mustache twirling stuff, especially because a lot of people who are doing a lot of harm right now want it to be normal, and it's already normal in their heads. But that's a different conversation. Antis are more triggering than this article, to be honest. Well, I'm glad. I mean, we've talked all about this stuff in terms of like being deplatformed and being like majorly harassed, and we have had some social media not funisms, but in terms of like the experiences of the person who wrote this article, our experiences do not map on to scale at all. So there's also that, and we feel extremely fortunate not to have been hit with a fucking Ultima level spell of fucking harassment that would make the average person want to not exist anymore. It is very inspiring to see someone survive all that and still, try to live their best life. We've been using antihistamines for nasal passage. Whoa. I'm glad you got some breathing going on. I hate congestion. It's like one of my least favorite things. Twine trash zines made of wadded up torn paper because we don't have the energy to do binding. Street recordings done from our bed where we lie immobilized. I have to laugh at that one because our workstation studio thingy is also like our bed and has been for a while. Yay, chronic fatigue. Laziness is not laziness. It is many things. Avoiding encountering one's own body, avoiding triggers, avoiding thinking about the future because it's proven to be unbearable. Slashing the Gordian knot isn't a sign of strength. It's a sign of exhaustion. Although I fashion this reflection in a manner that some may find illegible, it is not a fair representation of my sickness. Writing these paragraphs is taking constant doses of medicine, fevered breaks, a few existential timeouts, and a complete neglect of my other responsibilities. When I tried in true form to write in my realist moments of sickness, all that emerged were endless ellipses and countless semi-coherent revelations. Yeah, it does suck. It's like, oh, you have so much time to do this work. because you're disabled. And it's like, whew, disabled time takes so much away from me. With Trash Zine, I tore up the pages because I didn't have the time or energy to bind them. I put them in Ziploc bags, trash binding. In this new form, they were resistant to the elements and could go interesting places. I hid one in Oakland under a bridge and posted coordinates online. Someone found it. When read, they come out of the bag like my thoughts, fragmented, random, non-linear. If dropped, they become parts of the trash. Wow. Been trying to stay away from news/social media this year. Interestingly, this is a fascinating place for you to be right now, Diddy. Because on one hand, I'm not explicitly talking about all the stuff that's been happening. I have talked about it the stream already. But my point in talking about what we're talking about today is in a desire to hopefully empower people and raise awareness of some of the things that will help us inside of communities as we bear the brunt of the global and American overwhelming grip of fascism that is tightening and tightening. I'm definitely not in a place to always talk about that sort of stuff and whatnot. But I figured instead of talking all about all the, like, you know, rights or being eradicated, or, you know, stuff being gutted and all the stuff in the news, that talking about, like, some of the community stuff, that the behaviors that end up dividing people and ostracizing people and making it so much easier for us to get, you know, picked off, essentially, like a fucking horror movie within, like, communities like the LGBTQ plus community, for example, I think is imperative. Because even if you don't know what's happened in the last 24 hours of the American news cycle, the stuff that we're talking about here, I think, is still valuable for survival. Navigating when this happens to you, recognizing when you are being othered and scapegoated within a community, noticing when other people do it. Although this isn't necessarily offering solutions, I am hoping to at least encourage people to have the courage to not fall in line so much, at the very least. But it is really hard to look at the everything on fireism that everything is right now, and will honestly continue to be. That's the thing. Everything is exhausting all the time, forever. Yay, internet. Social dynamics. Community is disposability. There is no activist community, only desire for communities, or the convenient fiction of communities. A community is a material web that binds people together, for better or for worse, and for worse. In interdependence, if its members move away every couple of years because the next place seems cooler, it is not a community. If it is easier to kick someone out than go through a difficult series of conversations with them, it is not a community. Among the societies that have real communities, exile was the most extreme sanction possible, tantamount to killing them. On many levels, losing community and all the relationships involved was the same as dying. Let's not kid ourselves. We don't have communities. Oh yes, this quote was probably the most influential quote on like our thinking, not just because of this particular, not the quote itself even, but the broken teapot is a anarchist writing that we've read before, on the stream before even, and it goes into this sort of stuff too. And so basically this resonated with us, and in reading where it came from, we were able to unpack some of this stuff, and it was very validating for us because it's for a lot of people. It seems like it's overblown to say that like your entire life disappears from under you. In these cases, it's like some people might go like just move and make some new friends, you know, and it's like those things are right now especially I would say those things are extremely hard. As you know, the loneliness epidemic, people are on average don't feel like they have any friends. It is really hard to move even within a city, let alone like cross country or something. um and just like the whole like get therapy, it feels oddly hollow when people say, "Oh, it's not so bad," or "It was just a breakup," or "You can go to another queer group, right? It's fine." This is like serious shit, like losing your community. Is it is like death. We were mourning so much when stuff like this happened to us. Oh, Sani, thank you for pressing me on that. What did you mean by "I'm glad"? I'm glad that antis are more triggering than this article, because if they were, then I guess in a very real sense, I I think that it is a good thing for a text talking about harm to be less triggering than people doing the harm themselves. Because when you said this is less triggering than antis, I'm not imagining just like an anti just standing in a field, like the thing that kind of uh is defining trait of being an anti is doing anti shit, of like harassing people or trivializing people or telling people their their experiences don't matter, or that they need to seek therapy, for example, based on stuff like the behavior of antis is very triggering and upsetting. So I would imagine that that would be so much more terrible than just reading about some of the stuff that antis do. I hope that makes sense. I can't go. I can't go another local ABDL group because the rumors were ignored by the staff. Fucking Christ! Yeah, you just your whole community just burned. I mean, we wanted to. Part of the reason we didn't want to stay in the same place from the people we had like everything fall out from under us with, was also because it's like if we have if we are operating in queer communities in different states, then there is a much lower chance of like dealing with things where like friends or acquaintances have to like pick sides and choose which person is like the worst person and who's beyond forgiveness and stuff like that, and also like have to worry about the weirdness of trying to continue to exist in spaces where things are tense about your very existence. It and it's a privilege to be able to do that, and of course like we just got lucky in being able to like move far away after everything exploded. But yeah, you just you're just stranded. I'm sorry about that. That's fucked up. People crave community so badly that it constitutes a kind of linguistic virus. Everything in this world apparently has a community attached to it, no matter how fragmented or varied the reality is. This feels like both wishful thinking and an extreme lonely world. Trans femmes often have a community shaped wound a mile wide, and also the necessary lens to convert everything to profit. Queerness is a marketplace. Alt is a marketplace. Buy my feminist butt plugs. The dream of an imaginary community that allows total identification with one's role within it to an extent that rules out interiority or doubt. The fixity and clearness of an external image or cliche as opposed to the ephemera of lived experience. A life as it looks from the outside. Stephen Murphy. It is like grits. Okay. I thought you were feeding me mead. We're right. Pink capitalism, rainbow capitalism, that sort of thing. I mean, even on a more individual level, it does trickle down. In that sense of, you know, a bunch of like, say, Etsy stores. Like, when I imagine that buy my feminist butt plugs, I'm imagining like some small like Etsy store or something, not necessarily say well actually a thing that is very much in the category of this will be like what's that company? We've even bought from them before. I think it was Boyfriend Ets? Tomboyettes. Tomboyettes is very much that. We only found out recently that although Tomboyettes is explicitly a company that serves the needs of trans people and like gender nonconforming people, it's owned by like cis lesbians, which threw us off. But also like some people's complaints about certain things with them not being able to with things where it's like, oh, this doesn't feel right for like this type of trans body, and complaining about it, or like for example like gaffs not being as good at tucking or keeping a tuck, you know, for example, and it feels like it makes sense where it's like, oh, okay, this company isn't trans owned. Though even if it was, this thing talking about this and everything being a profit, that doesn't change anything. Even if everything was you know, was perfect within that sort of thing, we still feel the need to market everything because, of course, if you don't make money, you die. Community is the glue that bonds us all. The way the fragmentation that is happening is heartbreaking. Oh yeah, it's incredibly painful. It sucks, especially because, you know, you see it in all these degrees and you feel like you're just watching like a fractal of a fractal of a fractal of like a 100-car pile up, because it keeps happening, and it's gonna continue to lead to like worse lives for queer people. These idealized communities require disposability to maintain the illusion. Violence and ostracism against black, brown, trans, trash bodies that serve as safety valves for the inevitable anxiety and disillusionment of those who wish total identification. I'm now thinking of the people who go, well, we can't support this, or you can't do that. That'll make us look bad. What will straight people think? What will cis people think? What will white people think? Feminist/queerness takes a vague disposability and makes it a specific one. The vague ambient hate that I felt my whole life became intensely focused. The difference between being soaked in noxious, irritating gasoline and having someone throw a match at you. Weird fact, gasoline feels oddly smooth, like lotion. It's weird. Sorry. Don't rub gasoline on your skin, kids. Please. Normally, hate means someone and their friends being shitty towards you. Normal hate means someone and their friends being shitty towards you. Radical hate places a moral dimension into hate, requiring your exclusion from every possible space. A true social death. Curating queerness. An entire industry of curation has sprung up to rigidly and sometimes violently police the hierarchy who is allowed to express themselves as a trans or queer person. The LGBT and queer spheres find it upon themselves to create compilations of the best art by trans people, to define what a trans story is, and to omit the rest. Endless projects to curate, list, own, publish, control, but so few to offer support and mentorship. Yeah, yeah, I feel like it's very much in that like listicle sort of thing, or even just being able to check mark a list of, oh, an amount of, what's the word, representation, instead of, like, I mean, obviously there's the dimension of, oh, I have made this list of trans art that I would like other people to see and hopefully support those things. But it seems like a function of the like the media machine to have to frame it in that way, because listicles make things easily digestible. Um, and once you digest something, you shit it out. Just saying. The stories that reflect poorly on alt culture are buried in favor of utopianism that everyone aspires towards, but where few people live. People feed desperately on this aspiration, creating the ever more elaborate hollow structure of brittle chitlin that comprise feminist slash queer culture. To find the things I want in queerness, I had to find those who had been exiled from it, those who had the name been torn from. Interesting. I'd be very curious on talking more about the experience of like shared community with exiles. I guess that's in a way some of the stuff that we do, because like we very much so want people who are of, I suppose, more typical experience not to feel as though we're like kill all normies or something. But at the same time, we desperately want to have a space that people who are routinely ostracized and routinely the marginalized of the marginalized can, like, take up space and not be weird or bad. You know, we've had this view of, like, how like in Attack on Titan there's the way the walls are constructed. There's one wall, and there's the first wall, that like most outer wall, and there's like a population there, and then there's another wall beyond that one in case the first one fails, right? And of course this is there's like a style of like medieval like housing architecture, like building planning, I guess, that's like, oh, if we have the like, if the capital or the place where the ruler lives, and they live like they rule over a town, for example, having like sort of cordoned off access to parts of the populace allow for there to be a slowing down of getting through the entire encampment before you get to the people in charge or the people in power, the people who would rather have their subjects as fodder. In the context of Attack on Titan, it's obvious, right? The rulers are in the center; they're protected by the innermost wall, obviously. I think that the walls can also be seen in the context of like a panopticon. If we take this context and apply it to like different groups, we've to ourselves often thought of it like, okay, like pop culture in the most milk toast way is the most outer wall. And it's not as though there's like these monsters trying to break down the wall that we're worried about. It's more in the Panopticon, this is a prison. So thinking of it as a prison, the inner walls are not the most protected people, or the people with the most privilege at the center. The people with the most privilege, or the people with the most privilege, or at the very least the least things that marginalize them, are the outer wall, and every wall beyond that or inside is a level of being marginalized and being looked on by the outer community or the outer space, kind of in that omelas way, of someone who is acceptable to spit on, to look down on. And of course, anyone who's not in the outermost wall has an experience of being the one spit on, and one way that you divide communities and like the working class and marginalized people in general is to give some marginalized people privileges and not others, and part of those privileges allowing them to punish or hurt or exercise some sort of exercise their resentment on the ruling class upon someone who they're allowed to beat up. We've often thought of in this within this mini walled prison, we've thought of it like, okay, so there's like non furry or non alt queer people, and then there's alt queer people, or there's queer people who are queer in the general sense of not being normative, not being cishet straight or whatever, but are much more quote unquote normal, or people who, if BDSM clubs or like in gay clubs and stuff were outlawed, they'd be like, well, I don't go to those anyway. And I mean, you don't have to go to them to want them to exist, obviously, but like the people who are just like, oh, we need to assimilate. That's the term I should say. I should say there's like quote unquote normal people on the very outside wall, and then there's like assimilationist marginalized people on a more inside wall. So you have assimilationist queers, and then they're looking down upon furry queers. And you go even deeper down, and you have furries looking down on baby furs, and then you have baby furs looking down on cub fur and cub artists, and so on and so forth. And of course, there's many different ways that this works, many different styles of this. You can build your own wall at home very easily, and that's also what happens when you ostracize. Like, people don't always just get ostracized individually, but ostracized by like a school of thought, where it's like, okay, like you're this thing, so we're ostracizing you. I think something that's been very common that we've noticed other people do as well is like with the like pro and anti-fiction like conversation, that a lot of people are like, I am neither, because I don't want to deal with the binary nature of this conversation. And sometimes we in the past have fallen into that. And it falls into a both sides is sort of thingy, but also I recognize that there's a push and pull, and there's a desire to basically be endlessly fighting. So that's also something to keep in mind, and trying to stay out of being in the middle of it is reasonable. Although eventually accepting the nuance and recognizing that picking a side might actually do more good than harm is something that I value, certainly. Ugh, lost my brain there for a second. Whew, talking about this for 3.5 hours really does that to you. We're almost at the end. We're almost at the end. We're almost at the end. Huh, we never considered what gasoline would feel like. Once we had to get some gas from a gas station and put it in one of those like little gas cans and take it to like a then partner's car because the car ran out of gas. and it kind of overflowed and sprayed, and it got all over our hands, and that's a story for another day. It's actually a really interesting story. But that's how we found out how gasoline feels. Have a good night, Denny. If you're still here hearing my voice as I say good night, I hope you sleep well. What's going on with social media? We feel like we may have missed something important. I don't think there's anything new that I was particularly commenting on necessarily, but I also don't know how much you use social media. I mean, we're one of those fuckers who it is it is uncommon for us to wake up and not immediately check our like blue sky or whatever. I mean, a lot of social media is the same as it ever was, I guess. In terms of like a current ongoing discourse, I am not aware of one particular one necessarily. Like the hot tea of the day, I do not have that necessarily. But I do keep seeing the same recycled takes, the same sort of shit getting stirred up again and again and again and again. And it all tends to boil down to some of the same things and the same sort of puritanical nonsense. Um, and people just being afraid that they're on the wrong side of history by being okay with a problematic kink that is very much something that a lot of like abused people seem to flock around or something, you know? Um, I think there's probably like just an ongoing fucked upness with like moderation on social media sites a lot lately, as one might tell, even beyond just what's happening on X and that cluster fuck. Um, I could easily go into the thing with I think Mark Zuckerberg literally said that Facebook and Instagram are not going to be used fact checking things anymore, and they're going to be using community notes like Ets, which I'm sure is not going to add to misinformation at all. Though those things aren't directly, that's not directly involved with this conversation, at least in the context I was thinking about. Um, and just like many things, like I was talking about originally when we first started this discussion, there's just so much that we could be talking about, and there's so much that's ancillarily that could be ancillarily related. Um, I didn't know if that cleared things up. I don't even know if it seemed like I was vague. I didn't even know it seemed like I was vaguely referencing something that like I assumed everyone would know until you said something. So that's helpful. You use Mastodon. Ah, I see. I always think of Mastodon as kind of a closed loop. Uh, I think Blue Sky is probably like the closest most a more typical internet user is going to approach like a decentralized social media, and of course Blue Sky isn't fully decentralized. Uh, but maybe someone who is doing well in like the art and being seen as like a content creator space can like coach us on it. But from our perspective, having Mastodon be your primary social media is very limiting. And I might probably believe that even if I wasn't trying to, become all known as an artist on the internet, because it feels a little bit too insular, and because even though that there's lots of instances and a lot of places you can be, it's broken up so much that it kind of makes me want to have something that's at least a little bit centralized. There's only so much that like the small networks can give someone like me, though obviously it's not for everyone, and it is really good to have like small communities you can talk amongst. So honestly, I don't even know what level of like intra community disputes and bullshit that you even aware of, Sonny. I'm a little I'm a little jelly. I'm a little jelly of you. Good to see you tonight as well, Issy. Despite me talking at length about very troubling things. I'm on a Blue Sky hiatus for mental health reasons. Shit. Honestly, our Blue Sky experience has been so much better when we stopped using the Discover feed. And when we muted people that we just felt like re-instigated a lot of unuseful discourse, I'll say. And there's plenty to not like about Blue Sky. I don't think there's any social media site that won't in some way erode your mental health unless you use it in a very specific way. Yeah. Complaint and purity. There's nothing wrong with the politics of complaint, but there are several risks, like developing a dependent relationship with the enemy. Politically neutralizing oneself by dumping all of one's subversive energies into meaningless channels, or reifying one's powerlessness by identifying with it because it makes one virtuous. Complaint becomes a form of subcultural capital, a way to morally purify oneself. Jackie Wong, The Tumblrization of Everyday Life. Damn, I'm about to read that one. That's the next one we should read. Honestly, the fact that we haven't read every thinker that gets quoted in this article is a fucking shame. Popular feminism encodes pain into a regular complaint/click cycle, keeping everyone in the realm of emotional survival. Constant click, constant strength, constant purity. Lacking true community, the energy spent is not restored. Those with more stability in their life can keep up the cycle of complaint, and those with lower amounts of energy are filtered out, creating a culture that glorifies a strength not everyone can access. There is immense pressure on trans people to engage in this form of complaint if they want access to spaces, but we, with our higher rates of homelessness, joblessness, lifelessness, lovelessness, are the most fragile. We are the glass femmes of an already delicate genderscape. Purification is meaningless because anyone can perform these rituals, an effigy burnt in digital, and their inflexibility provides a place where abuse can thrive, a set of rules which abusers can hold over their victims. Deleuze wrote, "The problem is no longer getting people to express themselves by providing little gaps of solitude and silence in which they might eventually find something to say. Repressive forces don't stop people from expressing themselves, but rather force them to express themselves. What a relief to have nothing to say. The right to say nothing, because only then is there a chance of framing the rare, or even rarer, the thing that might be worth saying." I do feel sometimes that we just don't want to say anything because, well, if I say something, then we'll draw aggro. Doesn't help that the vibe on social media in general is one of questioning someone in bad faith, getting in their face, and implying not only that they're wrong-headed, but somehow abusive. Or the worst thing the human race has produced. I feel like the internet is very adversarial right now. People talk about feminism and queerness the way you'd apologize for an abusive relationship. This isn't for the people who are benefiting from these spaces and have no reason to change. This is for the people who are exiled. The people essays aren't supposed to be written for. This is to say, you didn't deserve that. That even tens or hundreds or thousands of people can be wrong, and they often are. No matter how much our socially constructed brains take that as a bizarre message to lie down and die, then nothing is too bad, too ridiculous, too bizarre to be real when it comes to making marginalized people disappear. Ideology is a sick fetish. All right. Oh, some solutions. I forgot they got some solutions in here. You're grieving over a prolific artist. Do you mind mentioning who? Uh, is the artist someone who is giving up art, or something that's more permanent? I'm also asking because if it's a prolific artist that you're paying attention to, it's probably someone whose art we care about. Ah, I see. DM me if you please. I won't tell people the stream. I'm gonna give you some amount of privacy on that. Resisting disposability. Let marginalized people be flawed. Let them fuck up like real humans who get to fuck up all the time. Fight criminal justice thinking. Disposability runs on the innocence guilt binary, another category that applies dynamically to certain bodies and not to others. The mob trials used to run trans people out of communities are inherently abusive, favor predators, and must be rejected as a process unequivocally. There is no kind of justice that resembles hundreds of people ganging up on one person, or tangible lifelong damage being inflicted on someone for failing the rituals of purification that have no connection to real life. I want to reiterate it again that the way that our ostracization went, we were a little bit complicit in. We were doing that like complying in advance thing that I talked about earlier, and that's an important thing too. Like, to I think that is an important thing to have an ego healthy enough to balance giving yourself grace, but also recognizing that you can do wrong, you know, and not just can do wrong in the far away theoretical sense that everyone is capable of it, and sometimes we do harm without noticing. That sometimes we do harm that we're not made aware of, or we're not made aware of for a very long time. And that it's really easy to condemn yourself without a full understanding of what you've even done. Although I still don't think that it's the common way people respond to this sort of thing. Though I feel like maybe that's also something we need to process too. Because in our head, it's like most people would actually respond like, like coming out swinging, right? I don't know. People actually tend to go for the path of least resistance, and sometimes the path of least resistance is lying down and taking it, of knowing what's coming and not resisting, of showing your belly. And especially in the situations where, and I guess that's like our context, the context in which the writer here was talking about is very much in the framing of within her experience and what happened to her, they were bad. I mean, obviously there's still nuance to be explored. I think she'd be willing, based on what's written here, to have some amount of nuance, but like radical acceptance that what happened to you was wrong is really important for like self-esteem and healing. And from a distance, it can be hard to tell a difference between that and someone being like someone being rigid in their position. Pay attention when people disappear. Like drowning, it's frequently silent. They might be blackmailed, threatened, or in shock. Very true. Very true. Oh, I kind of had lost the train of thought, but I guess I just wanted to be like, within the context of what she was talking about, she's talking about people who were like willfully doing harm, and being and like really doubling down on it. We still think that the stuff that we reflect on most, and how we explore talking about like abuse and stuff within and toxic relationships within our platform based on our own experiences, we think that it is not as the fault does not feel as clear on an individual level, and maybe that's us trying to disperse like fault, so no one person involved in the situation has to be too much at fault. But I think that a lot of times people don't give each other grace, and that really fucked up situations end up happening not because someone has it out for another person, but because we're all damaged people trying to make sense in a fucked up world and doing our best, but then oftentimes moving from a place of hurt and pain. And sometimes when you're coming from that place, you're not always thinking logically, maybe you're not thinking empathetically, and maybe you don't have the brain cells to, honestly. Going back again to the top, let marginalized people be flawed. Let us fuck up like real humans. And I guess that's also something I want to internalize, because a lot of people that we have been wronged by, we see the humanity of, and it is really easy to just throw out the humanity with the bathwater and recognizing that harm has been happening. And that's one of our biggest fears, of taking the harm that's been done to us and using it to dehumanize people, you know? Even if the victim doesn't want to fight, which is deeply understandable, often moving on is the only response. Private support is huge. This is a time to make sure the wound doesn't become infected, that the PTSD they acquire is as minimized as possible. This is the difference between a broken leg healing to the point where they can run again, or walking with a limp for the rest of their life. They have just been victim blamed by a large number of people. As a social organism, their body is telling them to die. They need social reintegration, messages of support, and space to heal. Be extremely critical about what people say about trans people, especially things said in vagueness. The rumor mill that keeps trans people out of spaces isn't even so much about people believing what is said. It's about people choosing the safest option, and staining that plays on the average person's risk aversion. I think this one may be the biggest one, because that's a big part of the isolation. Most people who are like, steering clear of like the hot topics, or the character of the day, as it were, or whatever like discourse subject, or what have you, is a lot about just not wanting to get caught in the blast damage. And if there is a sense that you won't get eaten alive, or if there is a sense that that the ridicule will not immediately target you for not jumping on the bandwagon, then there's a higher chance for there to be for you to potentially inspire people to not be as aggressive and to hold space and that sort of stuff. Seeing someone else do a thing can give someone permission to do the thing themselves, like what we're doing here, or I hope we're doing here. Ask yourself if the same thing would be happening if they were white slash cis slash able bodied. Radical inclusivity recognizes harm done in the name of God. Yvette Flunder. Yeah, harm that is done for quote unquote good reasons is still harm. Marginalized spaces can't form healthy community purely from the rejection of the mainstream. There has to be an acknowledgement of how people have been hurt by feminist spaces and their models. That's valid. A common enemy isn't the same as loving each other. That's true. The enemy of my enemy is only my friend for now. Don't be part of spaces that place an ideal or community leader above people. This is an interesting one because this is something that I feel like is a lot harder to find. I'm thinking of I think it was a Tumblr post. It's like, it may have been a co-host post, or it may have been a Tumblr post that was reposted on a Tumblr post that was reposted on co-host, and that's how we saw it. But I do remember seeing it. Something like, everyone wants to be in a community, and they keep finding themselves in audiences. In the sense of literally a VTuber talking about this, I cannot blow past this because it's so easy to not find this in the spaces that I am rubbing shoulders with, or the spaces that you would find by being in circles related to us or stuff that we do. And it's not to say that you can't be in a content creator's Discord channel or server or whatever, but be aware of who matters. Do the people in the community matter, or just the leader? Think about our current situation with the fucking God president right now. Dream. On January 18th, 2015, I woke up from a dream. It was early morning, still dark. I felt very sad that the dream wasn't real. I wrote it down like I've written down all of my dreams for the last 8 years. She was my abuser. She came to my house on the island. I begged her to stop what she had done, to clear my name. She would not. It had been 2 years of being abused like a child because of her. I turned to walk deeper into the house. I looked back. She had a knife. She stabbed me. It was the happiest dream of my life because finally an abuser had done something to me that people would pay attention to. When I woke up, my entire spirit was crushed because I had not been stabbed. I felt the weight of all these years of abuse. I wish so badly I had been stabbed. I pulled the knife out. I wrestled the knife away. I called my friend to come over and help me. I walked over along the beach of the island and saw for the first time how PTSD had numbed and corroded every perception I have had since that August. This debilitating disease. I finally felt the brightness of the air in my lungs, the color of the sand and the waves. It was so beautiful. I just wanted to experience all the things that had been stolen from me. And there we go. Eyes twitching. That was a good read. Thank you, Dusk. Thank you. I appreciate folks being here and processing with me. I don't know. as much as we like talking about this stuff, and as much as we can go on about it, sometimes we feel like we're only making sense to ourselves. So it's nice to be able to bounce off of other people and and talk about it. I don't think this should ever be an end all be all to like you looking into stuff and finding your own opinions on things. So if stuff like what we talked about is of interest to you, then you should totally, look more into this sort of stuff. Literally every quote from this article comes from a writing that has explored something related to this. So there's a wealth of people talking about that sort of stuff.